בחרמון נמס השלג בחצי הלילה, בחרמון זורם לו פלג בחצי הליל, אבא שם על הר השלג בחצי הלילה, שר שירים על נס בפלא עם כל ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. בבקעת תמר פורח בחצי הלילה, הירח שם זורח בחצי הליל, שם אחי ודאי שומע בחצי הלילה את שירנו השמח כאן בישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. במדבר הולך החושך בחצי הלילה, שקט הס בארץ גושן בחצי הליל, לדודי עיני נחושת בחצי הלילה, וגם הוא חוגג כמו שכל בית ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. ואני יושב בבית בחצי הלילה, עם נרות וגביע יין בחצי הליל, וכוכב מאיר עיניים בחצי הלילה, לי מוסר ברכת שמיים ולכל ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. שוב צוהל.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар.
Future sons
Yes.
The Lviv Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 991 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again as we hear very big news that Ukraine has launched the largest drone attack since the beginning of the war on Moscow, literally the capital of Russia. And also, the USA is now threatening Putin's regime over the phone in a very bold move. And it's good to see you all once again on Sunday Fundraiser Night.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, especially in the Ukraine war today, as we've been able to hear some incredibly major news. As currently, the president-elect of the United States has just gotten off of a phone call in an indiscernible amount of time. It was either today or yesterday, but in shorter terms, the call was recapped that the Russians were told not to continue escalating on their own home territory inside of the Kursk Oblast, and were reminded that U.S. armed forces were in the area and would be able to react if the Russian Federation continued escalatory actions against the state of Ukraine. A very bold move, possibly moving the escalatory steps to about the maximum that they can be before the United States of America may truly get involved in the Ukraine war, at least by statements alone. At the exact same time, a major drone attack was conducted by the armed forces of Ukraine today inside of the city of Moscow, as we were able to see that around 40 drones entered the territory of the city of Moscow metropolitan area, with some of them being shot down and others successfully hitting their targets within the area of the capital city. A major attack, and not only that, the largest one that we have seen inside the Russian Federation so far. Meanwhile, another major Ukrainian drone attack occurred around the area of Bryansk, hitting another munitions depot within the area, and once again causing significant damage to Russian supply and availability efforts around the area of Kursk, as they have been attempting to ramp up their offensive efforts and try and push the Ukrainians out of the territory of the Kursk region. Simultaneously, inside the Middle East, we were able to see a a very bizarre and odd object flying over the city of Tehran. That was later found out to be a meteor, but still a very interesting occurrence, considering that the entirety of the capital of Tehran believed that it was some sort of an incoming Israeli missile. Meanwhile, we have also been able to hear some fairly interesting news out of Japan today, as an unfortunate fire raked the one of a Japanese minesweeper vessels in the area and ended up causing enough serious damage to the ship that's pretty much been put entirely out of action. Not an incredibly large ship in the Japanese Navy, but there has been possible rumors that the fire may have been caused either to a poor maintenance of the vessel or some sort of form of sabotage against the Japanese Navy, although we are assuming that it most likely was poor maintenance considering the strategic unimportance of the vessel. Meanwhile, we have also been able to see that inside of the Ukraine war itself, the Kursk offensive has been grinding on, with incredibly high losses being sustained by the Russian Federation and very little success being seen by their attacking forces to show for the high losses. The Ukrainian defenders appear to be holding the area quite strongly, and of course with the United States, or at least the future, I guess you could say leadership's warning today to the Russian Federation, we may or may not see that the Russian Federation begins to pull back off their offensive inside the Kursk Oblast, although we have already seen the contrary, with Dmitry Peskov coming out today and already making negative statements, in fact, nearly derogatory statements about the incoming president of the United States just today. Meanwhile, in the area around Pokrovsk, we've also been able to see a heavy amount of firefights occurring in this area as well, as the Russian Federation is still attempting to push forward their offensive towards the city of Pokrovsk and claim the key city that is a logistical hub for Ukrainian forces further north at Konstantinivka and also further south near to the Velika Novosilka and Volodar directions. It appears that the Russians are not making a large amount of gains today in this area. They have been able to move forward a small amount around Seladove, but that once again was at the result of incredibly high losses and appears to have been a general failure, at least in terms of casualties. But nevertheless, we have loads of news to cover today. And of course, I do have to make the mention that tonight is the Sunday fundraiser night. And it is an amazing Sunday fundraiser because this one is fundraising for Revived Soldiers of Ukraine, an amazing nonprofit that has been helping out Ukrainian soldiers that have been wounded in the line of service for years now. And every single bit of support that this channel is able to raise for the Revived Soldiers of Ukraine nonprofit goes directly to helping out Ukrainian soldiers that have been wounded in the line of service on the battlefield and helps them to be able to get a second chance at life. It is an amazing
Man, I'll tell you what, it's like the LSA has revived a ton of Ukrainian soldiers at this point. I don't know what the exact number is, like we'd have to do the calculations, but we've raised a ton of money for Revived Soldiers of Ukraine. Like, I'd be curious to know exactly like what the humongous chunk of money has been spent on specifically by Revived Soldiers. Like, obviously it goes to humanitarian aid and helping the soldiers out, but we've probably done a humongous chunk of like overall what they've received over the lifetime of the channel. Like, it's crazy.
And it truly is an amazing thing what the Lee Spring Army has done. And of course, I have to remind everyone that we have a $3,000 goal on this fundraiser tonight for Revived Soldiers of Ukraine. Each and every bit of support that y'all give is massively felt over there. The fundraiser is managed by YouTube, and YouTube, once the fundraiser concludes, compiles and tabulates all of the donations that were sent in, and then sends 100% of them over into Ukraine with no fees being deducted whatsoever by YouTube. So 100% of your donation tonight will be going directly to Revive Soldiers of Ukraine. But moving on out of that huge plug for the amazing Revive Soldiers of Ukraine fundraiser that we're doing tonight, it is time for us to move on over into the United States and get directly into what we were able to hear today, which was actually incredibly shocking, and we were completely blown away by this. This is almost a complete 180 compared to what people have been saying and what people have been seeing, and it's leading us to believe that the war in Ukraine may be alive and well on into the future and may not end anytime soon. It is a fairly interesting statement. I can't even play this up enough. I'm just going to have to get y'all straight into it and tell y'all what happened today. We have been able to hear that over a short while ago, we're not exactly sure as to the time frame when this phone call was made, so I can't tell y'all whether it was early this morning or in the middle of the day today or yesterday, but it occurred sometime in between yesterday and today. That's all we know at the moment about the specific time period that this phone call was made. But nevertheless, the incoming president of the United States, not the current sitting one, but the incoming president that was just elected early this November, made a phone call to President Putin of the Russian Federation. And the call has apparently gone incredibly interesting, and in fact, it seems as though it has actually blown up, and relations are already starting to fall apart at the very beginning of this phone call, as we have been able to hear of what exactly happened in this, and we will be showing you all the backup sources for this. But this is what we were able to put out on Twitter today about the information we got, as Eldor's Marva throws in a 250. Dang, that is huge. That is absolutely freaking massive, Matthew. Look at that. That's crazy right there. Crazy, man. But
that's the largest one of the night, actually.
That is the biggest one of the night. Absolutely insane. And getting us already up to $1.1 thousand on the fundraiser. And hopefully we will be getting well beyond the $3,000 goal. But getting into this phone call that we were able to hear about the incoming president and the Russian Federation's president, the U.S. incoming administration has spoken with Putin on the phone and threatened them not to escalate the war in Ukraine, and specifically, according to further information that we were able to get, not to escalate the war inside of the Kursk region in particular. And this is a very interesting thing. We'll talk about the implications of this and why this is such a threatening thing in a second, but getting through the rest of the call, the incoming U.S. administration, or specifically the incoming president of the United States, reminded Putin of the sizable U.S. military presence in Europe. And that's according to the sources that we have today. And a lot of people are going, well, that sounds like a trust me, bro. How many sources do we have? We do have this one right here. I only included one just so that we all would know that this is something that is true, but we were able to see that Putin was directly warned not to escalate the war in Ukraine, and specifically inside of the Kursk region, from the information that we've been able to get. And not only that, we have also been told that there was a threat given over the phone that the United States of America has an incredibly large amount of U.S. military assets within the territory of Europe, and that if the Russian Federation was to continue to escalate the war, there may be an unfortunate consequence that the United States may directly get involved in the war in Ukraine. That is the only thing that could be inferred by insinuating that U.S. forces are in the area and may respond to further escalations. This is actually...
That's kind of wild, like, to start out your whole, like, diplomatic relations, you know, and obviously Russia is obviously a dictatorship, and it's a nasty country. It's invading Ukraine, which is obviously wrong, but that's a hell of a way to open a phone call. Just call up and say, hey, look, you better, like, de-escalate, or we're going to get the military over there. I'd be curious to, like, hear that whole phone call, because surely Putin didn't say in response, like, oh, yes, sir, thank you very much, sir. It's like, surely he didn't say that. I would imagine it was probably a nasty response, but we won't know until later.
We won't know particularly for certain right now, and I do see some people saying this, and I've just got to clarify this so that we all know why we do not say the names of the presidents of the United States. We have never mentioned the name of the current sitting president, and neither will we ever mention the name of the future president. It has nothing to do with the person. It has something to do with the position that they hold as president of the United States. And so instead of emphasizing that it is, the current president or the president-elect that will be taking office here in the future, we rather like to focus on the actions of the office of the president, specifically as an institution and a branch of the U.S. government, and not as a specific person. That makes sure to greatly neutralize our political statements to where they're really speaking about what the president is doing and not trying to praise or condemn the specific actions of any sitting president, whether current or former. Or future, actually, presidents in this particular instance. But nevertheless, this is moving this up to 100. From what we can tell, it doesn't sound like things went incredibly well today at all on the phone, because we were able to hear that afterwards, and I believe that we have this on our Twitter, Matthew, if I'm correct, the statement that was made by Dmitry Peskov. Do we have that statement on our Twitter?
I don't think I reposted that one. I came across it earlier where he was basically saying, like, we don't trust the incoming president and things like that. He made some derogatory comments about the incoming president, but I don't think I reposted it. Let me see if I can spot it, though. I might be able to, like, quickly pull it up. Let's see. Peskov.
I was wondering where that was, because I did see it as well, but we did not repost it on our Twitter, and we do not have it on the war map currently. But we were able to hear that after the phone call, to give you all a little bit of an idea of how the Russians received the phone call, Dmitry Peskov immediately began to go out and say things that were fairly negative and, in fact, derogatory towards the president-elect and pretty much his future administration that will exist in America. Not only that, Russian state TV, which we cannot show this, began to show very salacious pictures of the president-elect's wife on television, and started to make a great deal of fun about the picture, possibly showing that the Russian Federation is now going to be completely against, which is what we were largely assuming, the incoming presidential administration, much like they were completely against the current presidential administration that has existed at the moment. It is a pretty crazy thing. It's an absolutely insane thing, as a matter of fact, to see what was done today over the phone. We were not expecting at all that there would be any kind of a warning or an immediate escalation, pretty much ramping it up to 100 immediately and insinuating that U.S. forces could get involved, because generally what a lot of people have been thinking is that the United States was actually going to be ramping down their support for Ukraine. And regardless whether one wants to say that there will be peace talks coming around the corner or not, the fact of the matter is that regardless whether the peace talks are coming around the corner, the incoming president-elect has made direct threats to the Russian Federation today that U.S. armed forces may possibly get involved in the Ukraine war, or may highly likely get involved in the Ukraine war if escalation of the conflict continues even from this point. That is a very concerning kind of a statement, because generally the U.S. policy for about 3 years now has been that we support Ukraine, but we are not going to get directly involved in the war in support of the state of Ukraine. That has never been the situation, and we never really expected that it would even be on the table. But with this new statement that's being made today, it's entirely possible that given a couple of months, we may actually see that the United States is conducting an armed standoff with the Russian Federation to force them into diplomatic negotiations with Ukraine, and possibly cessations of territory inside of Ukraine, along with other strategic objectives of the United States. We're not entirely sure, however. And of course, the waters are fairly murky, because many people have been seeing the stir that's been created around the Ukraine war lately, and there's literally 1.5 million different statements that are being made by literally anyone and everyone who even has a hair's influence in what's going on right now. Pretty much everyone's saying almost completely opposite things, but the most steadfast and important thing that we have at the moment is the phone call to go off of, and the phone call already sounds like it's setting a very hostile and standoffish tempo in between the Russian Federation and the United States as far as today is concerned.
And also, another bad sign as well is on Russian state media this evening, not too long after the phone call, like I think a day or two after the phone call actually occurred, all of a sudden this evening, they were airing some very lewd photographs of the incoming president's wife, which is certainly something that was probably aimed to irritate the incoming guy, I would assume, because I think that would irritate pretty much anybody if they saw that. And they were kind of poking fun and making fun of the pictures. So I think that might indicate, because obviously Russian state media is controlled by Putin himself, that might indicate that the seeds of dissent are being sown in between the incoming administration and also Putin himself. So we could see a situation where actually it becomes a more hostile between Russia and the USA based on those current actions.
It may actually be the case. And another thing that is even more interesting about the statements made today over the phone is that, according to the information we have, the president-elect was specifically mentioning further escalations within the Kursk Oblast against the Ukrainian forces that are there. This is a fairly interesting thing, at least on a diplomatic level, and I'll try and game plan out our hypotheticals here that show that this will be a pretty interesting kind of a stance to make. The Kursk Oblast is without question sovereign Russian Federation territory. The Kursk Oblast is Russian. No one is debating that at the moment. Of course, there is a little bit of debate. We largely make this very clear, though, on our channel. Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and Crimea are all Ukrainian territory without a shadow of a doubt, but still there is a bit of an argument to be had on the negotiating table over that. However, no one, including the Ukrainians, is in argument about who actually owns or controls the Kursk Oblast. Even to this day, the Ukrainians have made no claims that they own or have territorial claims on the Kursk Oblast, and for this reason, the president-elect of the United States issuing a threat over further escalations in the Kursk Oblast is pretty much putting the Russians into a situation where the conflict will escalate with the United States directly. There is a certain kind of a sovereign right that every country has to be able to defend the territory that it legally has by UN resolution. And the United Nations resolutions pretty much lay out, although the United Nations is useless, their resolutions do lay out that the borders that are internationally recognized are the ones to be respected. And currently, Ukraine is across that border. And by every right, the Russians do have the full authority to engage in battle with the Ukrainian forces inside of the Kursk Oblast and to push them back across the border. However, the crazy thing about that is that the United States is now going to threaten the Russians that if they do anything inside of their own domestic borders to deal with the Ukrainians, there may be possible U.S. military action conducted against the Russians in the future. And this pretty much creates a binary kind of an output here that the Russians will have no choice but to continue their offensive in the Kursk Oblast, and relations with the United States are pretty much going to hit the rock bottom because they're going to be going against the United States warning that was issued today. So we are going to be watching this a lot more. It's an incredibly interesting statement to make because it literally went from 0 to a 100 in the course of just today. We actually were looking around and trying to gauge what's going on out there the best we can. We still haven't seen a Secretary of State or Secretary of Defense picked for the incoming president's cabinet, but what we are starting to see is that relations may break down in between the Russians and the United States even further before a new presidential administration is to step forward, at least with what we're seeing at the moment and how things are going. So to put this out there for many people who may have been slightly worried, once again, be assured, it looks as though the Ukraine war is not going to be coming to an end quite rather quickly, and if it does, we may actually see the United States is able to secure terms that are within the West's favor as well as in Ukraine's favor as well, although we can't really tell that for certain right now. Many things could change and ebb and flow as the days and weeks and months pass up until the new administration takes office, but nevertheless, it is a very wild thing to see. And of course, we do have to once again remind everyone that Dmitry Peskov has already come out and made some very interesting statements today. And let me go see if I can actually find those statements that have been made at the moment.
It's weird. I couldn't find those statements. I just looked very desperately across the entirety of Twitter, and I could not find that post showing the statements made from earlier. So I'm not sure what happened to it.
Dang. Let's see. Let me see here. Let me see if I can find it. No, like, everything's been wiped, interestingly. Now, I'm not saying that they just went and wiped that out, but the last stories I'm seeing about Dmitry Peskov are from 2 days ago. Not a single one of them has been written, according to Google, for the past 48 hours. So that is fairly interesting to see. Let's see here. Yeah, there's literally nothing. That's weird. Like, every single story stops about 2 days ago, and there's nothing else about Peskov. I clearly, and Matthew saw it too, because we were both looking through Twitter looking for the stories of the day. We both saw it, and I think that was a great disservice that we did not republish that, Matthew, because that was probably the most important piece of info that we needed right now to show that diplomatic deteriorations are already occurring. But nevertheless, at the same time, we are able to understand that the Russian Federation state media, and this is something that we did see and you can find on Twitter if you want, but we can't show on stream, started to show very salacious, or in a more modern word, lewd pictures of the incoming president's wife, or the president-elect's wife, and started to make a good bit of fun about the pictures. And that largely would be considered, considering that Russian state media only makes derogatory statements about those officials that those statements have been approved about, that is showing that the Russian Federation is already starting to begin a spin on the story, and that the incoming president-elect is probably, in the Russians' mind, as bad or even worse than the current president that is in office at the moment. So we are going to be waiting to see what happens in between Russian-American diplomatic relations, because it largely sounds as though things are going to be going downhill, and it looks as though that the Russian Federation is going to remain pretty steadfast on its course of trying to liberate the Kursk Oblast from Ukrainian occupation, and this is going to put them at a head immediately with the United States of America, considering that we're already issuing them largely armed threats that they can no longer continue those actions or else. Also, someone said, show the pics. I'm not getting banned on YouTube for your fetish. Like, I'm sorry. That ain't happening. Like, I'm so sorry. Like, you can find the pictures literally anywhere, but that ain't happening here on the Enforcer channel. Like, this is not Cornhub. This is YouTube, so we've got, like, specific rules that we have to follow here. I thank you, though, for caring that much about the pictures that were shown, but I'm sure that one can find those quite easily. But nevertheless, moving on from that, and out of the threat that the United States has given pretty much today, or at least the incoming president has given today, we have been able to hear that there has been some very interesting questions being given, or more so interesting thoughts being given today on what's going on in between the United States and the Russian Federation, as the incoming United States administration has allegedly threatened Putin with military action to de-escalate the conflict in Ukraine. Ukraine. And that is according to every single account that we have of the phone call that has been given. And every single one of them are making the same key statements. The president-elect warned about the Russians de-escalating and then insinuated the use of U.S. armed forces if they were to not de-escalate the conflict. Every single source is largely saying the same thing. And for that reason, we are getting an idea that the Russians may not actually be that happy to oblige the United States requests, or may not be that happy with the incoming U.S. administration's actions in regards to the Ukraine war. And it seems as though a lot of people are in the camp that Putin is going to respond very badly to this. And if that isn't already happening, it's certainly going to be happening here on into the future. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking and what are people saying about this? And what are you thinking about it as well? Do you think this is going to go good, bad, or somewhere in between?
Threatened Putin with military force to de-escalate the conflict in Ukraine. Let's see what the audience thoughts are on this question. So 45% said Putin will respond badly to this, while 25% said only time will tell, and 22% said Putin will back down and listen as a result of this threat. And once again, I see some people in the live chat saying, well, this was an anonymous source reported by a mainstream media outlet. And while I do understand that, this is allegedly, according to the article, a legitimate piece of news. So we're going to run with it right now for being true until something's proven otherwise. So this call allegedly also happened a couple of days back. So it's not something that happened today, but it is being reported today by the media as well. So me personally, I would say that if it is indeed true what was said on the phone call, that military force was suggested, then Putin, with his massive ego, is probably not going to respond very good to this. It'll probably be a very bad response. And in fact, this could be the very beginning of very, very ugly diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Russia that we've never seen before. This could be the beginning of that if this phone call is indeed exactly what happened. So I'm with the 45%. And Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be with the 45% as well. I am going to assume that this is going to be responded to quite badly by the Russian Federation. This is something that usually will not go well. And I have a reason to believe it's not going to go well, because from what we understand on the phone call, the president-elect threatened the Russian Federation that they cannot continue to escalate the conflict, specifically within the Kursk Oblast, then insinuated the use of U.S. armed forces if they were to continue any form of escalations. Going off of all of that, we are to get the conception from that the Russians are going to be fairly pissed, because not only is the United States telling them to de-escalate with the threat of force of arms, they're also telling them to de-escalate on their sovereign territory that they actually have a right to fight on and reclaim the territory for. So for this reason, we are assuming that Putin is going to be taking this quite badly. And it looks as though the idea of the war ending here within the next few months probably is not going to materialize. We were largely of the understanding of that as holy moly.
Dang,
oh my God.
Man. Good gracious, man. A 600 NT from Anonymous and also a 500 from James Hughes, bringing us up to $2,038 on the fundraiser. That's crazy.
Man, that is freaking insane. Oh my Lord. And we've already gotten up to $2,000, well, almost to $2,050 raised out of the $3,000 goal. Keep it up. That is freaking insane. We are like slamming it tonight. This is absolutely incredible here. And moving on from that incredible fundraiser news right there, it's not going to go well. And I see that some people are not believing this, but we don't have any reason to not believe this currently. This does seem to be somewhat in line with historic trends that we've seen in the past on these kinds of issues, and for this reason, we do believe that this will most likely lead to further escalation in the conflict. We're not entirely sure if the United States would get directly involved in the conflict 100%, and to be quite honest, we are generally leaning towards hopefully we would not, because that would be the two largest nuclear powers. Well, the Russians are one of the largest nuclear powers on paper, but that would be the two largest nuclear powers on Earth slugging out in a conventional war. And we all know who would be the winner of that war. It would be the United States conventionally until the Russians nuked us, and then there would be no winner because they would also get nuked in return in the doctrine of mutually assured destruction. So going off of that, we generally are very interested in this one, and it looks as though things may be going on fairly okay in the meantime for Ukraine. It also seems as though President Zelensky is also showing absolutely no qualms with what's going on right now either, as he actually mentioned today that the Ukraine and the United States are working on air defense spending plans that go on well into 2025, pretty much through the latter part of next year, which is also showing that there is a great deal of U.S. government support even in the future in 2025 for the Ukraine war and its continued furtherance and support in, of course, the continuance of Western and American interests. We are going to be trying to see what will be happening with that, and I got to make that very clear. A lot of this stuff is still in the works, and while we're getting a picture of what's happening today, we still have to wait and see what the next actions will be. There are a million different branches of actions that could be taken based off of what happened today, or at least what was published today, and we do not know what those actions will be. They could be incredibly positive, they could be incredibly negative, they could be somewhere down the middle. We do not know until the next actions are made. At the moment, however, here are the hypotheticals that we have based on the phone call. The Russians will either have to abide the warning, or the threat for the large part, and back off of attacking Ukrainian forces inside of Kursk, or they will continue on. And according to the information that we have at the moment from the Ukrainian intelligence, we understand that they're going to be conducting a brand new offensive in the area of the Kursk Oblast within the next 3 days, and they're saying that it's going to be one of the largest ones so far, and attempting to actually uproot the Ukrainians from their positions and drive them out of Kursk. So based off of what we know, they're going to be going with the latter option, and off the information we have today, that is going to be putting them at odds with the United States government here in the near future. But still, a very interesting kind of an event happened today, because it's one that actually pretty much sideswiped Matthew and me out of the blue. We did not believe that that would ever happen, and it's now happening, so we are going to be waiting to see what is going to be unfolding with this. And I cannot
And also,
say that
once again, I see people in the live chat saying they don't believe it. I understand the skepticism. I'm a skeptic myself, and I tend not to believe anonymous sources. But considering the fact that we did hear Peskov comment on it, and unfortunately, we don't have that article to show you all. Like, I need to really find that before the stream ends tonight to show everybody that, to prove that we know what we're talking about here. We did both see that earlier. In fact, it was a video of Peskov actually commenting on it as well. So Peskov did make a statement about it. And also, the fact that the nude photos of the incoming First Lady showed up on Russian state television, that is no coincidence either. Why would they be doing that unless there's some tensions going between the U.S. and Putin? So I would believe there's probably a very strong likelihood that the phone call actually did occur, and what was said on the phone call is probably actually what went down as well. So it could be looking pretty ugly for the future. But for Ukraine's benefit, though, that's very good news, because if those two massive egos start fighting with each other, that means Ukraine stands to benefit massively from that, because a lot of aid's going to be flowing to Ukraine in the future, and also Putin's going to be on the short end of the stick with the largest superpower in the world, which is the USA. So Ukraine only stands to benefit.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to really try and see. I see some people saying that they don't believe it. Look, folks, we're not here to argue whether people should believe it or not. We just report what we hear. This is what we heard today. You know, you could make arguments to say that anything that any president says is not true and you don't believe it, but we have to work with what we hear. Anything that the current president says or the incoming president says, we have to take it for what it is. And this is what we heard happen today. So whether people believe it or not, this is the news. But moving on from that, and out of that interesting phone call that was made apparently today or yesterday, we are now going to be moving on into the Kursk Oblast to speak about the specific thing that the Russians were warned not to escalate on. And of course, the Russians are already escalating on it today. It appears as though the Russian Federation is continuing on their actions inside the Kursk Oblast, trying to drive the Ukrainians out of their positions. From what we understand, the Ukrainians are holding their positions very strongly in this area, and it does appear that the Russian Federation will not be able to push them out of the area completely, or try and get them to even fall back towards Suja. It looks as though the Ukrainians are going to be holding on to this area well into a year from now, at least, based off of the current situation that we're seeing. The Ukrainians have approximately 20 to 25,000 forces, troops that are in this area at the moment, and that's combat personnel, and the Russians have approximately 40 to 50,000. Based off of any kind of a minimal offensive numbers advantage, the Russians have to have a 3-to-1 offenders advantage to be able to overwhelm and push back Ukrainian defensive positions inside the Kursk Oblast. And just based off of the numbers that we're hearing today, they only have a 2-to-1 advantage or possibly a 2.3-to-1 advantage, meaning that they do not meet the minimum requirement of manpower and personnel within this area to be able to push the Ukrainians out of the Kursk Oblast. We are still seeing, though, that they are trying, even without an offender's numeric advantage, and it appears that it is going quite poorly, as the 82nd Air Assault Brigade has been picking off Russian infantry one by one south of, just north, actually, of Lyubomovka. And we can see a basement being blown to pieces, to shreds, you say. And we can even see another one also getting blown away as well. Ooh! And really quickly, Matthew, 1 second. Let me make sure to get your Discord call popped up and disconnect you, because your microphone is literally not picking up on the call. Like, I hear you out there, and I don't hear you in here. So let's see if this works. Hello, hello?
Hello, can you hear me clearly now? Hello?
I can hear you clearly now. That's really weird.
Oh, good.
Because, like, I heard you out there, man. You were like, oh! And I was like, it's not even coming through, like, at all. Not a word came through. But anyways, we can see them continuing to hit the Russians. And holy moly, they ain't taking it easy on them. And we can see that it's just endless disaster for the Russians for the large part. And this guy's hiding behind a tree. Did not work out for him. And that's the end of the clip from the 82nd Air Assault Brigade, and once again showing that the Russian offensive within that area is once again getting bogged down by the Ukrainian defensive efforts, and once again increasing Russian casualties, but not really getting a lot of ground. Moving on from that, though, and into the area of Pogrebki, we also got to see a Russian BMP getting blown up on the northern side by the 95th Air Assault Brigade, another Air Assault Brigade within the area that appears to also have the same kind of iron resolve in stopping the Russian forces from advancing further. And here's the clip. Oh my god. Holy moly. I'm trying to see if you're
Oh my god.
Hey! Is there any like lag in the call, Matthew?
No, it came through loud and clear. I just wasn't looking at the moment.
Oh, okay. And now there's lag. But hey, it's fine. You're getting a new Mac, so hopefully that'll fix the problem.
New Mac, let's go!
Hey! New Mac, baby! And we can see the BMP roasting down there, but absolutely incredible to see. And moving on from that, and into the area of Cherkasso-Porechno, although this is closer to Bolshoi-Solatskoye, we also get to see a couple of Russian BTR-82s sitting in a field in the Kursk Oblast after they had been destroyed a little while ago. We believe that these things were destroyed maybe about a month or so ago. It was actually a little while ago, because they're well rusted over at this point, and hell, even crops have been growing around them in the meantime, so we are generally assuming these things have been here for just a little bit. But still, it does look as though the Russian losses in the area are a bit of a grim reminder to those Russians who were trying to push the Ukrainians out that they've tried this before and have already failed. And also, oh my goodness, Matthew, the entire chat is saying that Macs are the problem. And the call's still not picking you up, man. Like, I can hear you talking out there and not a word is coming through. And the call is coming through just fine. Let me try this again. Hello?
Yes, hold on. I'm trying to get Discord to get all the prompts off my screen. It's asking me to do survey reviews right now. Discord sucks, but anyways, I'm back.
Well, it looks like a lot of people, Matthew, are saying that the Mac might be the issue.
Man, I don't care, man. Macs aren't the issue.
Man, I don't know, man. I don't know. But moving on from that and into the next clip that we have near Bolshoi-Solatskoye, we also got to see the 47th Magura, which has been moved into the area around a month ago, operating near to the direction of Bolshoi-Solatskoye against the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade and making sure to hold them down and also make sure to move up more reinforcements into the area. We could see the two Bradleys advancing and firing onto Russian positions in the tree line in front of them as they make quick work of them with the 25mm Bushmaster on the Bradley.
Also, by the way, I'm seeing here, it looks like Miss Disa came in clutch and sent us over an article here showing where Peskov commented on the incoming administration's peace statements. And he said he'll have to look and see how consistent he is with them and made some derogatory remarks. Sadly, though, I clicked on the article and it looks like it's on RT and it's in another language. So let me see if I can try to translate it real quick. I hate using RT as a source, by the way. Damn, I pressed English and it took it away. So I'll have to see if I can find an English version of it and then pull it back up.
Interesting. But still, that is something important to note, though, is usually while we do not use Russia Today as a source, and we never will use them as a consistent source, coming from a Russian politician or a diplomat and pretty much quoting their statements made, I feel like they would be fairly accurate. At least in my opinion, on that one thing. I don't know about how you would feel about that, Matthew, but I don't have a feeling that they would be lying or contorting exactly what Russian diplomats are saying, considering that Russia Today is pretty much the state-run media platform that is supposed to get out their exact words and message to the Russian public.
Well, me personally, I'm always skeptical of anything, especially when it's coming from an anonymous source and also the mainstream news articles as well. I'm very skeptical of those anonymous type articles like that. But considering the fact that we have other evidence to go with it, like the Peskov statements and also the pictures showing up on RT, that to me shows me that something is definitely happening in the background. Because if they're buddies, that's not what you'd be doing. You wouldn't be making statements, basically creating a fight between the incoming administration and Putin. You would not do that. You'd be trying to make statements to bring them together and make them look like buddies to try to win over their favor. So it looks to me like there's something happening, but once again, without actually hearing the call verbatim and hearing the audio, it's kind of hard to tell. It's like without 100% certainty.
And so we will be holding off on taking that as credible information until we can actually get other proof from another source showing what Dmitry Peskov said today. We were able to see, just once again for full disclosure here, while we didn't have it for the stream, we were able to see a clip earlier today that actually had Dmitry Peskov talking about the phone call and also had subtitles below it. That was not from Russia Today, but sadly, since we do not have that source, we're going to have to pull that news out of the cycle and await further confirmation and further information on that specific part of the story before we state it as fact. But moving on from that and into the area of Russia as a whole, we were also able to hear of another major occurrence that happened today. The Ukrainians unleashed another swarm into the Russian Federation of long-range drones, targeting and attempting to destroy major Russian ammunition depots and supply hubs, and not only that, the capital of Russia itself, Moscow, in the course of this drone attack. From what we were able to see, the Russian Federation was not that successful in shooting down most of the drones that were flying from the Ukrainian border and to Moscow. The only area where we saw some success was around the area of Moscow itself, and it looks as though the Russian Federation is once again showing how weak they are on air defense, and also, not only that, how fragile they are to just small drone attacks, which can make it pretty far into their country, and not only that, do a considerable amount of damage. But moving on down into the area of Bryansk, we were able to see the first target that became victim of the drone swarm, as we were able to see that an ammo depot into the area of Bryansk City was hit quite heavily, and we were able to see the little fires, the nice burning fires out there of the Russians' 1060th Logistics Center outside of Bryansk. Boy, do the fires burn brightly these days. It's just wonderful to see, and we love to see it. It's beautiful, as a matter of fact, incredible even. And we were able to see it from another angle right here. Look at that.
Man, that is nice, man. Look at that.
Man, that thing be cooking. And it was cooking quite well, and we were happy to see it. We love to see it, as a matter of fact, because it lets us know that the Russian forces inside of Kursk will once again be dealing with at least short-term supply shortage issues. Whoa, look at that boiler. And boil indeed it does. And that's the end of the clip right there. Very interesting to see the little fires burning outside Bryansk. And once again, it's another ammo depot that is going up in flames. We can go into all of the analysis of that and explain it in depth, but really the short-term explanation to make sure that we can get to what happened in Moscow is that that ammunition depot is pretty much funneling supplies and munitions into the Kursk area, if anywhere. And with the loss of that depot, we're probably going to be seeing once again a slight decrease in logistical efficiency by the Russian Federation. And this means that Russian offensive efforts in Kursk will be slightly curtailed due to a lack of available munitions and supplies to keep their army running within that area. But moving on into the major victim of the drone attack from last night, the drone attack in Moscow was something to see. It was actually the largest one so far of the entire war in Ukraine. 40 or so drones, I believe it was around 43 in the final count, made it into the Moscow metropolitan area and its defense perimeter. And things were not going well, to put it quite lightly, within the area of Moscow. And we were able to see a decent amount of footage of drones burning on the ground. Burning buildings down to the ground, actually. Some of them did fall as debris and ended up damaging some residential buildings as they fell, but others, according to what we were able to hear, did make it all the way through and ended up hitting their target. And we see one of those Liutis right there, just flying on over. Very gentle-like, very peaceful, very demure. Holy moly, a $333 donation just came in from Hal Rose. We know that's Hal Rose.
Is that Hal Rose? I think that is Hal Rose.
Yeah, that's got to be Hal Rose, because he's the only one who throws them in like that. And we've hit the goal!
Hey, we hit the goal. Jaga, jaga, Igor, Slav Ukraine. I'm telling you what, man, another successful one on November the 10th. One day before Veterans Day, that is. So very good to see, I must say.
And it is a wonderful thing to see. A huge shout out to Hal Rose for throwing in that $333 donation. It came in as anonymous, but with that kind of a number, we always know there's going to be Hal Rose, the absolute channel legend, who threw that in, and we just hit the fundraiser goal in under an hour. That has not actually happened for some time now here on the channel, and that is worth celebrating. Put an LSA in the chat if you are proud that the Lee Spring Army is once again showing the world that the Lee Spring Army will never die, and that the Lee Spring Army will be a long-lasting Lee Spring Army, an absolutely real Lee Spring Army. But moving on from that and on into the rest of the news, in celebration of hitting that incredible goal, we were able to see more clips and footage of the Liudi drones entering Moscow. Here's one of them. Oh, that one got shot down, actually, by the way. I forgot to tell you all that. That one actually got obliterated. Y'all can see it again right here. The Pantsir got it. Moving on into
Mish.
Man, they got that mish, man. But moving on from that, we can see another Liudi. Same one, actually, just from a different angle.
That was a very quick stop for that thing. Zero, it was like 60 to 0 in like 2 seconds.
Man, they did the inverse of the speed test. They did the decelerate test, like, and it looked like it decelerated quick. It gets louder the closer the cameraman gets.
Осколки, прячь голову! Под крышу!
Our Gopnik is unfazed by the massive explosion just overhead and some of the debris falling nearby. The Gopnik continues to carefree smoke on the cigarette and just make sure to remember that the blessings of the Russian Federation will always fall directly on your head, because the Pantsir will literally drop the Liudi right on top of you and then cause a fire.
Под крышу!
We can also see a dog running away, because they do not have that dog in them.
Иди сюда, Кнопа! Кнопа, иди сюда! Иди, друг, сюда, под крышу!
Dude, this guy right here is like unbothered, man. He's like, look, holy
Oh
moly!
my God, man, $1,000 donation from
Taz!
Brittany Taz. Dang, that is the biggest one of the night. That brought us up to $4,000 like that quick.
Oh my lord, that is the biggest donation that we have seen, I think, in like months at this point. I can't think of a $1,000 donation that we've seen so far to the fundraiser. Unbelievable. Put another LSA in the chat for that. Brittany Taz is a legend of the fundraiser tonight. That is insane. We have not seen a $1,000 donation to a fundraiser in a hot minute, and I am absolutely stoked to see that, because we have now gotten $1,000 above the fundraiser goal tonight. We had $3,000 as the goal. We're now at $4,030. Absolutely insane. And everyone putting an LSA in the chat for Brittany Taz, a true legend of the LSA and a hero of the LSA as well, without a doubt. And I would have to say that Brittany Taz threw in that $1,000 donation to revive soldiers to Ukraine as nonchalantly as this Gopnik is on their smoke break right here. This Gopnik is unfazed, man. Like, this one guy's like, oh my God, a drone just got shut down. And this guy's like, it can't be bad. I'm on my smoke break right now. Call back in like 15 minutes. I'll maybe worry or something like that. But man,
oh, блядь, I gotta go on the smoke break and have a lucky strike, блядь. It's a shame there's not an oil refiner that through the sun, blядь. I'd like to dispose of them on the refinery's pipeline.
And meanwhile, man, while he's saying that, that dog's looking at him down there with a side eye like, real? Like, is that real or is that cap? It's like, no, that's real, man. Like, the Russians are arsonists.
Ёбаный в рот, а!
But that is the end of that clip, and beautiful to see the drone attacks making their way into Moscow. We also have some additional clips here of more damage that was caused. We were able to see that some cars were caught on fire by some of the falling debris after the strike. It burns quite warmly. The Russians are happy for the warmth. And that's the end of the clip. We can also see a line for a soup kitchen over here, apparently. I didn't know that they had a soup kitchen nearby, but don't mind me. I would love some of that Russian wall-paste soup that they're starting to bring out these days because of the economic hardships. You know, God bless the Russian Federation and all that jazz. But nevertheless, the drone attack inside of Russia today was quite big, and that was a pun not intended by saying Russia today, but nevertheless, it was a major attack, and this was the largest attack we've ever seen on the Moscow air defense perimeter in quite literally the entire length of the war. It is starting to show us that the Ukrainians are trying to ramp up the pressure and also cause a decent amount of pandemonium within Russia's largest metropolitan center, with around 10% of the entire population of the Russian Federation living within the Moscow metropolitan area. Now, once again, coming under direct attack, the largest attack of the entirety of the Ukraine war. It is really something to note. And we are starting to see that a lot of people are wondering about that massive drone attack that just happened on Moscow and what the Russians might do as a consequence of that action. Ukraine did just launch it. The largest drone attack of the war today, and not only the largest one, but it was the largest one ever on Moscow, which is kind of a record in itself. And a lot of people are wondering, will Putin escalate with attacks on Kyiv, or has he kind of been doing that all week? But it does seem as though most people are believing that Putin will be reciprocating them attacks and trying to send them right back to Kyiv, kind of like with a return to sticker sender on it. Others are thinking, in smaller amounts, that Putin can't really do much else, and so he just kind of has to sit back and cope. Much like others have to at this point, like the Chinese. And some are saying maybe, but probably not, meaning that they're kind of a little bit on the fence, but they are generally believing that the Russians might try, but they might not be able to, or they might just not have the will anymore. They simply lack the will, the unmitigated vril, even. The riz. They are not skibbity gyat. They're none of that. You know, like they're sigma or whatever the hell it is. I don't know. But nevertheless, a lot of people are putting in comments on this. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about this as well? Are you thinking that the Russians are about to be Omega, or do you think they're about to have that skibbity riz and try and do something? And what is everyone else thinking as well?
So I'm not really sure about the brain rot. I'm not sure about which one to go with on that. But anyways, it says here that the Ukrainian government launched the largest ever drone attack of the war today, and will Putin escalate with attacks on Kyiv? 71% said yes, Putin will reciprocate on Kyiv with a similar drone attack, while 16% said no, Putin can't do much else, and 6% said maybe so, but probably not. And I would say this, I believe the reason why Ukraine suddenly decided to launch the largest drone attack of the war, because clearly there had to be a reason, is because we haven't been reporting on it very much on the stream or the videos, but Russia has been unleashing a hellstorm of attacks on civilians inside of Ukraine. And I think Zelensky said, we've had enough and we're going straight to the source, which is Moscow, and we're going to bomb the hell out of that city. And that's what we saw today. A ton of drones going into the central Moscow and other areas as well, and hitting everything they could find. So I think that was basically revenge for all the recent civilian attacks that Russia has been launching on places like Odessa and other cities like that. So I do believe that Putin will reciprocate. It seems like the attacks on civilians by the Russian side is getting much, much worse in recent days. And once again, the Russian government is escalating quite a bit. So I don't think it's going to be stopping anytime soon, and with the 71%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally have to say I do believe that the 71% is correct at the moment. I will also have to cast my vote in favor of the 71%. They are probably right on the money. The Russians are going to be sending another major drone attack towards Kyiv to try and return the favor. A lot like how the German Blitz on the United Kingdom was immediately reciprocated by British bombings of Berlin, which were originally believed to not be possible, but then the British bombed Berlin and then everyone knew it was possible, and then Berlin started to slowly turn into a mega slum. Which, have y'all ever seen the pictures of Berlin by the end of World War II, like 1944 or so? Berlin, 1945, we'll go with that because that's probably when it was more photographed. Aerial picture. And so let me go see if I can find this. Here we go. All right, so let me make sure that I get y'all good pictures, long-lasting pictures of Berlin, because y'all have to see what it had turned into by that point. And here we go. This is a good one. That's what Berlin looked like in 1945.
You're kidding.
Oh, no, I'm not. It is 100%.
I had to go run to go get a paper towel, man. I had a little bit of a spill here. It was an oil spill right here near my Mac that I just love so much. It was right next to it, and it got me scared to death.
Oh.
So I'm trying to salvage this because my Wi-Fi signal is already weak, and I don't want it to be aqua-filled and submerged either. So just
Uh-oh, and he's just cut out. He just
Ah,
cut out.
shit.
Right there. I mean, he's back. He's back.
Oh, can't even
Dude,
pick that up, of course. But
dude, that was
dang, anyway.
comedic timing, man. You were like, I don't want it to go out. And then, like, literally cut out right when you said that. I was like, oh my God. I was like, it didn't just go out for good. But still, Berlin
I
had.
will say though, that's crazy though. Like the picture of Berlin right here. That is wild to see. Like I just got to take a look at it.
Oh yeah, man. These are wild pictures to look at. And what a lot of people might say about this is, no. This didn't happen up until like 1945 at the end of the war because the Soviets started to shell Berlin. That's not exactly true. Pretty much Berlin was already a ruin for the large part by mid-1943 to late 1943. Most of the city had already been bombed to the point of almost complete destruction. It was pretty bad off throughout most of the war. And what's even crazier is that by the time of 1944, throughout that entire year, and then early to mid-1945 when the war ended, we were able to see some pretty interesting pictures. Like the Reich Chancellery building, which is in central Berlin, was literally just surrounded by rubble and debris, and it also been bombed itself. And so they were like getting out at the Reich Chancellery, dude, you know, like with like the SS guards and stuff there, you know, doing like the salutes and everything, and then just going into this ruined, bombed out building to work. It's like, this is sad, honestly. Like a lot of people don't really give a lot of emphasis to how bad off the Germans really were in World War II, because once the entirety of the Allied forces got involved against Germany, it went downhill literally instantly, and they were pretty much living in slums for the majority of the war. But still, it is pretty wild to look at the pictures of Berlin. And let me see if I can get... Oh, hey, look at that. That is Berlin. There's Tempelhof Airfield right there. Look at
That's
that.
Berlin. That looks like an American plane right there flying over.
Yeah, that's a B-17. Actually, look, they got it in color right here.
Oh, that's nice. Just colorize it real quick. I didn't think they had color then. It must be some AI.
Yeah, I think this was like a recolorization or something like that that was done later. But still, Berlin was in rough shape, and I have a feeling that by the end of things, I don't think either Kyiv or Moscow will look like it was in that bad of a shape. But I'll be honest with you, I think about as much ordnance by the end of the war will have been thrown at both cities as had been thrown into Berlin or at London during World War II. If we combine the two together, we might figure that out later on once the statisticians really get to work on compiling the numbers and stats. And if that is the case, that would actually be pretty crazy to see. But still, with that, we are now going to be moving on from that little rabbit hole about Berlin and what happened to Berlin in World War II when it did some really questionable things in World War II and all that stuff. You know, and there was this guy with like this little mustache, and he kind of looked like Charlie Chaplin, but he was like really evil, and he did all these crazy things like going into Poland with one tank of gas, you know, and all this kind of stuff. Like, and that was that whole thing. We don't really talk about that much anymore, but it is an interesting part. But nevertheless, moving on from that and on into the rest of the news that we have today, we are going to be moving y'all down into something that terrified the locals. I'm telling y'all, it freaked them out. They were scared to hell and back. The Iranian government was scared. Everyone was scared. Matthew, do you know what I'm talking about today?
Tell me more.
There was an unidentified flying object over Tehran today. It left a giant streak of fire in the sky. It looked like an incoming Israeli missile. The Ayatollah Khamenei was crying in his office. He knew it was over. It was the end of times for the Islamic Republic of Iran. It was absolutely scary, and you wouldn't believe what it was. It was literally just a meteorite coming in through the atmosphere. Here it is right here, actually. And they're about to zoom in on it. There it is. It was a meteorite. The entire city of Tehran legitimately thought for a short while that this thing was either an Israeli aircraft or that it was an incoming missile. It was just a meteorite. It was hilarious though to see the panic.
I don't know why, but I just thought, like, I was thinking about the people panicking on the ground, thinking this was like the incoming Israeli missile. You know, the episode in Johnny Quest where they pointed at the Yeti on the mountain. They're like, "Oh no, look, it is the Yeti." So that's what they were doing, pointing this thing right here. "Oh no, look, it is the Shin Bet," and they're just like the Israeli missile flying in.
Man, I wonder if we can find that clip. You know, like, oh no, the Yeti, because I remember that one, man. We got to show it to y'all for reference if y'all haven't seen that before. Let's see, Johnny Quest. Oh no, the Yeti. There has to be like a small clip out there.
I don't know why it popped in my mind all of a sudden, but it just reminded me of that. Pretty funny.
Let's see. Dude, there's YouTube poop versions of the Yeti, dude. I'm scared to pick him, man, because the audio plays like it's going to be horrendous, man. But let me see here. Dude, that Yeti was freaking horrendous, man. Like, it looks atrocious. I'm not gonna lie, man. Now looking at it, like, they had like a $5 animation budget for that thing. Like, dude, you can
And it
literally.
made that silly noise too. It went those goofy noises they made.
Dude, I think someone literally clipped the noise. That's it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's somewhat close to it. I don't think that's exactly it.
Bro, I legitimately think they put like a toilet in the recording studio and just flushed it for that sound right there. I'm not lying, dude. That sounds like a toilet flushing. Like, doesn't it? Like, listen to that.
It does.
Yeah, it sounds like an old
That's
toilet.
a royal flush. A royal flush on an old crappy mic.
Oh my god, dude. Okay, hang on. Let me see here. Maybe I can actually get the Yeti. Like, let me just see if this is the clip right here. We have to get y'all the Yeti, folks. Wait. Did he just do the thing? Yeah!
There it went. Yeah, that was it. That goofy sound. Sound like hot dog, man. We lost like 100 viewers. Going, oh man, make sure you pause it. We don't want to copyright strike.
Yeah, we don't want to be copyrighted for that, but still, that is funny as hell, man.
Man, that copyright large and come down talking about
Bro, that's what we're gonna sound like when we get the strike for that one. We're gonna go something like that. But anyways, oh my lord. And beyond that, that was what everyone was like down in Tehran when that meteorite flew over. They legitimately thought it was an Israeli missile or something along those lines. It ended up just passing over, and that was the end of the story. But I had to share that with you all because it was making the rounds today. Like folks were reposting that all over. I even saw, actually, interestingly enough, Matthew, Keemstar reposted it too. Like, it was making rounds that much, and like Keemstar was like, they spotted something unidentified in the sky. It was most likely a meteorite, and it's like as time passed, like everyone was like, yep, that's a meteorite. They were freaking tweaking though in Tehran, man. You would have thought that it was legitimately an Israeli missile with what was going on social media at the time, because I looked at it, I was like, it looks to me like a meteor, but with the way they're freaking out, I don't think it is. And then nothing has happened since then, so it was 100% a meteorite that they saw, and they are so scared in the Iranian government and just in the city of Tehran as a whole about an Israeli counterstrike coming here in the future. They thought instantly, instead of a meteorite, it was an Israeli missile coming in. Like, that is crazy to think, man, how much the Iranian government right now is gripped with fear over the Israelis because they saw a meteor, no joke, that was entering the atmosphere, and they thought the Israelis were about to blow up Tehran. Like, no jokes aside, that was what they thought. And so with that, moving on out of Tehran, and that like crazy wild story today, like I was about to actually post that as well today because I saw it in the middle of the day when we were trying to make the news cycle. It almost actually made it onto the news cycle. If we made a midday video today, I would have brought that up and said, we don't know what it is yet, but the entire city of Tehran is in chaos. But we waited a little bit, and it was 100% a meteorite. So it still would have made the news cycle though, because the pandemonium down there was insane. It was palpable. It was like Whitney Houston stinging the Star Spangled Banner at the NFL. Like, it was like that. It was that electrifying down there in Tehran. But anyways, moving on out of Iran and on up into the rest of the news that we have tonight. We have a lot of frontline news coming out of Ukraine, but we also have this little tidbit of info coming out of Japan. But before we get into the Japanese news, which has never made a round on our news circuit before, this is the first time Japan's ever being mentioned specifically as a part of the news on the channel tonight. We do want to make sure to give a massive shout out to those top donors who have made this fundraiser possible and gotten this thing up to an insane $4,200 raised on the fundraiser. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so let's give these top donors of the night a massive shout out. And also, I don't know why, but my audio was not picked up. I actually said something a moment ago and it didn't pick anything up, so very odd, very weird. But anyways, I'm glad it's picking it up now. And our first massive donation of the night to the fundraiser goes to Brittany Taz, who put in that massive $1,000 donation, by far the biggest donation of the night. And huge shout out to Brittany for that massive generosity to the fundraiser. And also, while we're at it, huge shout out to James Hughes, who put in a $500, as well as Hal Rose, who threw in a $333 donation, and then Outdoors Delmarva threw in a $250. Then we had a $100 donation from some guy called The Enforcer, as well as Hal Rose as well, along with Dad Good, who threw in a 100, and BC Skyman as well. And finally, Ken Cardos threw in a 100 also. And then we had a 70 from Bodie Burt, and a huge shout out to Bodie as well. And also, we had a $50 donation from Greg Carrier, M60 Tanker, Ted Mitchell, John King, Cliff H, Sir A Real User 9, as well as Jim Z, Mike Smith, and also Axel K. And once again, huge shout out to all the top donors again tonight. It's everyone who makes it possible in the LSA to reach the fundraiser goals, and huge shout out to everybody we weren't able to call off as well, because once again, we would not be able to hit $4.2 thousand raised without every single donation coming in, and they all add up. So once again, huge shout out to the LSA, another successful Sunday night fundraiser. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to say a massive shout out to everyone we were able to call out, and the folks we were not able to call out for the amazingly successful fundraiser we had tonight. I don't know why I added the to the beginning and then tried to stick with that, but it was an absolutely amazing fundraiser. These fundraisers have been doing incredibly well for years now, and this is another one that is for the books as it hit the goal and blew well beyond it. We are always massively proud and happy to see that so many people continue to stand by these fundraisers and support Ukraine and show the axis of evil around the world that the West, even as individuals, stands with our interests around the world, not only in Ukraine, but really everywhere. And it once again shows that Western resolve will truly never be defeated because the people believe in what they are once again supporting and will support it themselves if need be. It is absolutely incredible. A huge shout out to everyone we were able to call off, especially Brittany Taz for throwing in a $1,000 donation. We have not seen one of those in an incredibly long time. And also a huge shout out to everyone we were not able to call out who threw in less than $50 as a donation. We sadly can't call off everyone because there are so many people who donate to these fundraisers, but we are still wildly grateful and appreciative of each and every one of y'all. Much like we say, each and every citizen has their role in this republic and makes this nation possible to survive each and every day, no matter how big nor how small you feel in the nation. Everyone's support to these fundraisers makes the exact same thing possible. If it wasn't for all of the incredible folks who were donating less than $50, half of the fundraiser total, about $2,000 worth, would have not shown up tonight. We would only be around $2,000 right now, and that's why y'all make a huge difference. Everyone does their part, and everyone makes this fundraiser and really the nation and the Western world possible each and every day through their individual efforts, no matter how big nor how small they feel they are. And so a huge shout out and a thanks to every single one of y'all for making this possible, because if it was not for y'all, we would not be able to make sure to have another successful fundraiser, to beat another fundraiser goal, and to have the claim that the Lee Spring Army has never missed a fundraiser goal in its entire history. And so with that, it is time for us now to move on into a couple of questions, because we actually have a lot of interesting questions. And I also want to make sure to let all of y'all know that there are no super chats tonight, so it's literally a live chat night only. So those are the only kinds of questions that we have. And so if you have a question, throw it in. There's a decent chance that it will most likely be answered. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and also in the meantime, huge shout out to Neil Vizanot, who threw in a $100 donation to the fundraiser as well.
Dang.
I just want to give Neil his credit also for that massive generous support to revived soldiers of Ukraine. And huge shout out to Neil once again. And moving on here to our first question of the night. This one's going to go to Amy Lee Rodriguez, who says, do you think that China will back North Korea still, no matter what's happening?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure if they will or won't. They generally would back the North Koreans if it meant that they kept the status quo in the area. But if the North Koreans are getting too unstable, they might leave them to the dogs, really, for the most part, and just let whatever happens to them happen to them. I generally think, though, the Chinese will stand with the North Koreans by and large, because it gives them a buffer zone in between South Korea and the Western aligned South Koreans, which have U.S. forces inside their country and always will at this point. And so for that reason, the Chinese would want to maintain their buffer zone, which is literally North Korea as a country. So for the large part, I do think that they will be backing them up in the future, at least in their survival, but I do not think that they're going to be conducting any actions on into the immediate future where they are supporting the North Koreans offensively or anything along those lines. We have generally no belief in the Chinese and their offensive abilities at the moment, or much less their will to conduct any kind of offensive actions, because the Chinese generally like to try and build their power quietly and mostly economically and legally. The fighting side of things for the Chinese is their last-ditch scenario. Unlike the Russians, where it really was like their go-to in 2014, 2008, and 2022, the Chinese have never really gotten involved in a lot of foreign wars. In fact, they really have not gotten involved in any. And let me go see if I can go pull up Chinese wars for y'all and get this list. Now, also, I want to let y'all know that this list includes all countries that have been in China. So, obviously, this is not the modern communist Chinese that were fighting in the 26th century BC. Like, that did not happen. But moving on from that and all the way up into the modern day, past all of the wars that have happened inside of China, and I'm sure that we're about to hit the Taiping Rebellion, and y'all will really see that that was probably the one. Yep, here we go. There's the Taiping Rebellion. But we want to get into the modern day. Modern China. List of wars involving the People's Republic of China. And, actually, no, we just want to know the wars. Why in the world? Oh, wait a minute. Okay, so this looks as though how they broke up modern China. So I guess they're including the Republic of China and the People's Republic of China together, which is Taiwan and China for everyone who does not know the names of the two countries officially. But still, let's see here. We want to move up to Communist China. So we want to see, that's not the one we're looking for. Those are not the one we're looking for. We're looking for everything past 1949 because that's when the People's Republic of China officially began to exist. So the Chinese Civil War was, I guess you could call it the first one, although China as a modern day nation did not exist yet, but this would technically be their first war. Beyond that, and beyond all of the battles that were well documented against Taiwan, they then annexed Tibet. Although that really isn't a war, it was literally just like almost a bloodless annexation at the time, although it was not really supported well on into the future. The Korean War is the other major conflict that they have been in. The Sino-Indian War isn't really a war, it was a border skirmish, and that's actually why the Chinese and the Indians beat each other to death with like spades and like sticks and stuff in the Himalayan mountain region, is because the Sino-Indian War, if you want to call it that, although it was really more of a border skirmish, ended up laying out a treaty that did not recognize any official border in that area. It's kind of like an unofficial temporary border, but also completely forbade the use of firearms in that area. These weren't really conflicts either. This is more so, once again, another border skirmish with the Indians. We were also able to see another border skirmish with the Soviets. Then they kind of got involved in the Vietnam War, but only in terms of supporting them and also sending advisors. They weren't never directly involved fighting the United States or South Vietnam. They also supported Laos during the Laotian Civil War. They did fight, though, during the Sino-Vietnamese War. That was a legitimate war. So right now, we have the Chinese Civil War, the Korean War, and the Sino-Vietnamese War. Beyond that, literally every single thing that they have done has been some sort of a standoff or some sort of a smaller border skirmish with one of their surrounding neighbors. So going off of that, the Chinese have only been experienced in 3 wars in their entire I believe it's about an 80-year existence at this point of the People's Republic of China. And so going off of that, we can see that generally offensive wars of really any kind is not really the Chinese strong suit. They usually get involved in defensive wars or wars that they believe are a necessity for the protection of their national borders. And so for that reason, we generally would believe that they'll never get involved with the Koreans or the North Koreans offensively because it's just not historically their thing, and it probably never will be their thing. The only time we would see that would be the case is with Taiwan. That's the only country that we ever believe they would actually offensively invade on their own without being provoked, and that's because they believe Taiwan to be a part of Greater China, or specifically Communist China, and they want to reunify them with the Communist Chinese. And that's why we believe that this is the only outlier to the norm, but I do not believe that the Chinese will support the North Koreans in an offensive manner, only defensively, to maintain the buffer zone that they have as North Korea. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next question.
All right, so our next question here is going to go to Plazoth, who says, how close is the world to actually getting to World War III?
It's kind of getting there, in my opinion. I would say that's it's getting closer. Now, some people may or may not believe some things and some statements. On this channel, we take them at face value. We have no reason to disbelieve something because that would show an inherent bias. So anything that comes across our pretty much our breadth that we see we report it as the news. Usually official government sources and things like that are sources of news. And with the threats that the United States made today against the Russian Federation, considering that we have to take those as true, it does seem as though escalation in between NATO and Russia is going to be moving on up the rung. We don't really know if it will all the way. We don't know if this is a temporary thing to cause such a diplomatic standoff that the Russians blink and then get to the concessions table. That may be the strategy. We don't really know until it's completely run its course, or it may actually be a legitimate threat and we're going to follow through on it and the Russians are not going to listen. That may also be the case as well. Generally, I will say that at least in Europe, war is still very much a certainty across the entirety of the continent. That may actually be coming around the corner. As far as in the Middle East, I don't see any major backers of Iran officially yet, so that might just be a regional conflict and remain at that at the moment, because it doesn't really look like the Russians are like dead set on backing the Iranians. They haven't done anything to support Iran so far, at least directly, against Israel, so it looks as though that will largely be a regional conflict. As far as Korea is concerned, that could possibly become a major world conflict, and Taiwan could as well. But for now, it seems as though the tensions in the Korean Peninsula have leveled off at an incredibly dangerous high, but still have not completely tipped over into a shooting battle on the border or some sort of a major conflict. So for the moment, that one seems to be once again kind of getting more towards the stable side of things. And with Taiwan, we don't really believe that that'll be kicking off until the end of this decade. So for the large part, if anywhere would be seen that there would be a world war, it would be in Eastern Europe at the moment, and the chances of a world war breaking out, at least with what we've heard today, it's actually a little bit closer than it ever has been. But once again, we're shooting against the odds here. The chances of world war breaking out are always slim, but it always takes just a very precise amount of actions to be made in a certain sequence for a war to break out. So while it looks slim, there's still a chance, but it will most likely happen in Eastern Europe. And so I hope that does address that question incredibly well, at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be getting into the rest of the news.
All right, and this one is going to go to Judy from the live chat, who says, can the U.S. fight Russia even though they are in NATO?
Can the U.S. fight Russia even though they are in NATO? Yes, we can, actually. We can fight the Russians on our own without NATO getting involved as a whole. NATO is a defensive alliance, and this is actually a good moment to explain this to everyone by looking at the NATO Charter. The NATO Charter is the defining body. It's the actual article that defines what NATO is and what they do. And it's actually somewhat short. This is the entire NATO Charter. It's 14 articles. Most of them are fairly shortly worded. But nevertheless, this is what the article is about. Article 1 kind of lays out what the NATO alliance is. The parties undertake, as set forth in the Charter of the United Nations, to settle any international dispute in which they may be involved by peaceful means in such a manner that international peace and security and justice are not endangered, and to refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force in any manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations. Article 2 also lays out what they do as a kind of like a joint alliance, and then starts to explain what that kind of means. It lays out that it's a defensive pact. The parties will contribute toward the further development of peaceful and friendly international relations by strengthening their free institutions, by bringing about a better understanding of the principles upon which these institutions are founded, and by promoting conditions of stability and well-being. They will seek to eliminate conflict in their international economic policies and will encourage economic collaboration between any or all of them. Generally, NATO is actually the framework that created the European Union, because it was really through Article 2 that the European continent was able to have this underlying assurance of stability that France and Germany were able to meld together back, I think, in 1954 and 1955 to create the very beginnings of the European Union. And let's see here. Hang on here. And here we go. It really takes the entirety of the article to explain what NATO is. But Article 3 says, in order more effectively to achieve the objectives of this treaty, the parties, separately and jointly, by means of continuous and effective self-help and mutual aid, will maintain and develop their individual and collective capacity to resist armed attack. This is laying out exactly it's a defensive alliance. And also, notice it says to resist armed attack. It's not an offensive organization. This isn't an organization where it's like Play-Doh, where you can mold it into whatever you need it to be and just make it fit the situation. So this does not mean that NATO tomorrow can go to war in support of Israel against Iran. They have not been attacked by Iran. Iran did not violate any of the NATO charter, pretty much declaring what can be cause for war, and so for that reason, it can't be offensive. We also cannot see that the United States goes, okay, I'm going to war with NATO, and everyone I'm not going to war with NATO. The United States will say, I'm going to war with Russia, and everyone in NATO has to go with me. That's just not how NATO works. NATO works as in countries can get involved in wars separately if they wish. No one else has to get involved in them. A great example of that is France's war in Algeria back in the 1950s, right after the NATO charter had been made. They were at war in Algeria, and nobody came to really aid them at all, because that was a war that they got involved in on their own, and technically that was still a French holding at the time, by international definition of law. So for that reason, no one got involved. You can also see other conflicts where countries were doing their own thing and NATO did not get involved. Like, for example, let me think of some conflicts where NATO didn't really get involved that other countries got involved in. The United States in Vietnam, the United States in Afghanistan, the United States in Iraq. NATO never really got involved because there was no actual reason for NATO to be involved, and there was no way we could really drag them along. So that kind of shows, at least at a minimum, that NATO is a defensive alliance. It's not an offensive one. And so the United States, if we did get in a war with the Russian Federations, and we did that preemptively, and we weren't attacked to get us into the war, that means that no one else would be joining. It would just be America. The other countries in NATO could decide unilaterally to get involved on America's side as a sign of goodwill and a united front against the Russians, but they wouldn't have to. And that's probably the best thing that I can explain about it, at least for the moment. And so with that, I hope that does. Also, by the way, Jeff Cool brought up a good one. The Falklands War. The Falklands War was one that directly affected the United Kingdom. Although technically the Falkland Islands is outside of NATO's jurisdiction, because there's also a certain kind of a box of territory or land that is protected in the NATO charter, and the Falkland Islands certainly does not fall within that little box of protected area. So while Argentina did invade it and it is sovereign British land, at the same time, however, the British couldn't ask for NATO to get involved. It was kind of their own thing from the start, and everyone knew that. So that's why no one else got involved. But still, once again, the United Kingdom got involved in a defensive war on its own volition. A defensive war, technically, against Argentina on its own volition, and no one else really joined them. So the United States would get involved on their own against the Russians. I hope that kind of goes through a better and deeper explanation of why that would be the case, because the only way that the whole of NATO can go to war with someone at the same time is if we are attacked. That is the only way. Beyond that point, it's very laissez-faire. Anyone can do anything they want for the most part and go and attack anyone and everyone they want, but they're on their own if they do that. And so with that, I hope that addresses that question incredibly well. And it's now time for us to move on over to...
And also, Enforcer, real quick, I do have a poll running real quick. I just had to ask this question real quick because I was curious, because you crapped on my MacBook, which really hurt me to the core. I put up a poll here. It says, would you rather have a Windows laptop with Intel or an Apple MacBook with Apple Silicon? And 64% said a Windows laptop with Intel. And 22% said Apple MacBook with Apple Silicon, and 14% said they're going for Linux because they like the Penguin. And for me personally, I'd have to say this: I'm not an Apple nut. I don't go to bat for Apple. No, I don't. I have an iPhone, I have a MacBook, I have an iPad, I have a TV, I have a studio display. But that doesn't mean I'm an Apple nut. But I will say this: the silicon chips, they are very fast. Like the fastest processors you can buy right now is the M4 Mac chip, which is very impressive. The GPU still has a ways to go. I think NVIDIA has them beat on that for now. But of course, it is a laptop. Like the MacBook is the one I'm referring to specifically. And there's really not that big of a graphics card you can fit in a laptop right now. Like they have really good NVIDIA ones, but the mobile versions of the graphics cards. But for me, that MacBook is the supreme laptop. I love it. I've had the M1 for a long time, and it served me well until here recently. And now I'm going to upgrade to the new one to try to make sure the stream runs smoothly, because we have to do what we got to do to make the stream sound good. So I'm with a 21%, but I think I know where the versus at.
As he cuts out again, once again proving Mac superiority. But nevertheless, I'm with Windows. I'm with Windows, really as a actual computer, not a laptop. With Intel, because it's just better. That's my opinion. I just don't like Apple that much. I have an iPhone, but I don't really have anything else that's Apple. Their products are okay, but Macs are more so made, in my opinion, as a glorified Excel spreadsheet computer. A PC, like mine is, can do anything, and largely has the ability to do that. here's the thing that I always find funny with the arguments on this one. I'm always like, PCs are better, and Matthew will be like, no, Macs are better, and then I'll be like, yeah, but can you play a video game on a Mac? And he's like, well, no, but they're about to be able to make it to where you can play some games on the Mac. And I'm like, you see, that's the thing. It's like, in my opinion, a computer should be universally versatile, the best way to put it. It should be able to do literally anything and everything that you want it to. And the fact that a Mac cannot play a video game tells me that there is something that isn't really great about the Mac. Like,
Oh, the
computers.
new Macs can actually play the video games. It's got the 40-core GPU in it. It can actually play like really good, like 100 FPS on most games on the computer. Like I saw it play several. I can't remember the names of the games, but I don't play a ton of games on the computer, to be perfectly honest. But it was playing a lot of stuff, and it was playing them at really high settings as well.
I'm just not gonna lie, man. Like, I just don't have a lot of faith in Macs. Like, I don't think I ever will. Like, iPhones are good. I'll say that. I think iPhones are way better than Samsung phones. But as far as PC versus Mac goes, I just don't really like Macs. I see some people saying that they work well. Some people are like they're terrible. I just generally think PCs are better. And on top of that, I've been able to always play video games on the PC, which just in that one right alone tells me that they have to be better. Because if the Mac is so good, why is it just finally being able to do what PCs have been able to do the entire time? Like, that's my opinion on it.
Maybe so, but one thing's for certain, I will say this. Every single Windows laptop I've ever looked at in history, the build quality is crap on all those laptops. They're all plastic. They have like LEDs like it's a casino on board the laptop, and I'm just not a fan of it. Like the Apple build quality, you can't beat that, and I put a lot of faith in like having an all-metal laptop. Like I'll pay a little extra for that. And also, unfortunately, you gotta admit, like if you're not gaming, which I use my computer solely for work, I don't game on it whatsoever because I'm not really a PC gamer regardless. But it's really, really good for everything except for the gaming. Like it's really good. Like I've done all my editing on the MacBook. Pretty much everything with the entire Enforcer channel I've done on this one MacBook right here, which is pretty impressive. Everything from videos to the animating that I've done on the videos as well. It's all been done on here. So I personally swear by the MacBooks. I hate just having a problem. I'm not sure if it's Discord or the MacBook. But I'm upgrading to a new one, so hopefully that fixes it.
But what's weird, I will say this though, what's weird is that when you were out in Texas, there was like no call issues at all. And then you come back here and you're literally like just right next to me in the next room, and there's huge issues. I don't know if it's like a proximity sort of a thing or what. I'm not really sure on that one. But I still find that very weird. And hopefully the new Mac will be able to fix the problem, but who knows if it will or won't. And also, let's see here, seeing some people. Someone said, come on, guys, I'm here for the news. Wait your turn. But let's see here. Macs last forever and just work. Windows updates suck. Oh, come on. Also, I gotta say this, just my honest take. Macs are made in China. PCs are made anywhere.
But they're designed in California, though.
Does that matter though? That's like saying like, like my coal compactor was designed in America, built in China. I promise you that thing's going to bite your finger off like next minute, like no doubt. Because Chinese stuff just isn't great. Like, like hell, like China is asshole. Don't trust China. China's asshole. And like my PC, man, like most of it, from what I was able to see when I was adding in a new little SSD, most of it's from Taiwan. So I'm just saying, my computer, it backs Taiwan. Your computer might have PRC bugs in it. You never know.
Man, but the Apple Silicon chips, they're TSMC made though. Like it's literally straight from TSMC.
I don't know, man. I mean, like it may be made by TSMC, but it's manufactured in China. My computer was manufactured in Sweden using most.
It's just assembled there. That's all. Like all they did was let China get the parts together and screw them in. That's all they let them do. Other than that, they got TSMC to put the 3 nanometer chip in the computer, and pretty much all the other components as well are sourced from around the world. And then they're just simply put together in China. But they're designed, and the whole like computer itself is all figured out in California. So it is USA. Like it's got its little USA bit to it.
Perhaps, but still, we will be moving on back into the news to make sure that we get some news. But moving on from that and into Japan, we were able to hear that there was a fire on board the Ukashima, which is a Japanese mine hunter, and I stuttered my way through that very well. But nevertheless, here is the fire on the mine hunter, the Ukashima. I was about to say Japanese Imperial Navy, and that's why I caught myself, because it's like that's wrong, and then I had to say Japanese Navy.
You stopped at the worst possible moment. I'm not going to lie.
Stopped at the worst moment. Clip it. But still, that little mine hunter was cooking. Very unfortunate to see. We have been able to hear that it sustained some pretty decent damage. But moving on from that, and out of the area of Japan, we are now going to be moving on back into the Ukraine war, because we still have a lot of news to cover in this area. We were actually able to see an American-provided M1097 Avenger shooting down a Russian drone with a Stinger above Kyiv. Check this out. And we can see them locking up that little drone up there with the M1097's aiming system. We can now see them firing the Stinger. It's an impact. Oh.
And it stung.
Man, that thing be stinging.
Man, it be minging.
Aw, man, it's stinging. Oh, man.
Oh man, I'm feeling the burn. Oh man.
And it's not.
You're not in the top 1%.
The top 1% of of hot dogs people own half of this country's herpes. But moving on from that. Maybe a little too far there. Maybe a little too far. But moving on from that, we were able to see the aftermath of a Baba Yaga striking a Russian position. It was bad. And also, let me make sure to read the subtitles, because I told folks we were going to do that again. This is our working dugout, and as he shows a completely destroyed dugout in front of him. What's left of it? Starlink cables go inside. Huh? It's all left. That's from Ukrainians dropping from Baba Yaga, working up our dugouts. And I guess they are. But moving on from that and on into our next clip, we were also able to see the Russian losses over the past 24 hours. And holy moly!
0 Bobcats, like they said over there. KJ said in the comments. He said, "Bad day for Matt. 0 Bobcats. Sorry, tomorrow will be better. I trust that tomorrow shall be a better day." And like I actually wrote there, I like writing and talking about myself in the third person here. Matt may never recover from this, and it's true. I may never recover from this, as I wrote it in the third person like an absolute nut.
Man, you wrote that like that guy in Seinfeld. You know the one I'm talking about, who would talk about
Jimmy
himself.
doesn't like shoes.
Yeah, Jimmy doesn't like shoes. It's like, but you're here. It's like, why not just say I don't like them? But anyways, that was the whole point of the joke, and I just literally explained it and sounded like an idiot. But moving on from that, Miss Disa, the keeper of the records, did say that the supply truck losses and fuel trucks, which are combined into one loss here, is actually the second highest daily loss in the war, which is incredible to hear. But let's break it down. And not on the dance floor, but let's break it down and see what the losses are. 1,350 Russian soldiers wounded and killed in the past 24 hours, along with 29 APCs, 122 supply trucks, 11 main battle tanks, 31 artillery pieces, and 44 drones. Overall, not a bad day. It was actually pretty decent, and it looks as though the Ukrainians are holding up. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on from that little clip and on down and into the area north of Svatove, where we were able to see a Bastion 2 MLRS. Look at this beauty firing its rockets, doing work up there. Whose work? America's work. And it's doing it absolutely free of charge, minus about $100 billion in military support. But nevertheless, it's wonderful to see.
Those trucks right there, man. With those tires on them, they can climb over anything. That's a very capable truck.
Dude, I think I saw one of these on Spin Tires back when that was the thing on Steam. But moving on from that and out of that clip and further down the line and towards Chasiv Yar, we were able to get a brief clip of the fighting in Chasiv Yar today. Y'all want to see it? Because they were absolutely greasing. Woo! It was beautiful. And then we got that nice AK-74 over there with that Bakelite mag. We love Bakelite here on this channel. This is an amazing kind of plastic. It is just orange. Like, that's literally all it has going for it. But moving on from that and out of Chasiv Yar, we were able to see that the Ukrainians were able to stop the Russian offensive largely dead in its tracks today around the area of Pokrovsk, with Ukrainian efforts making sure to take out the Russians that were found in the area. The 68th Jaeger was not only Duncan Jägermeister, they were also putting out sick beats and slamming Russians out there on the field. Look at this Russian running around this burned Lada. Sadly, just didn't work for him. We can now see a third-person clip of the drone attack. There's the Russian, and he's like, oh, bliat, don't do it. And he threw the rifle, and it didn't really work. Unfortunately.
Now, if he wouldn't have thrown the rifle, I think he'd have been in better shape.
I think he would have missed, like, completely, but he threw the rifle and, well, the shrapnel spoke for itself. But moving on from that clip and down towards Seladove, we also get to see them hitting the Russians in this area. This clip says Ukrainian grenade drop on a possible North Korean. There are no North Koreans inside of the Donetsk area at the moment, so that title is largely not accurate. The only area where North Koreans are is in the Kursk Oblast, so we do understand that this would be a Russian. Or if they look Asian, they're most likely from Siberia. And so we can see the bomblet being dropped. The Russian drops. And then he just gets a little jiggy with it. We're going to be closing down the clip right there, though, because that's all we have to see. Y'all get the picture. But we also got to see some of the recent flights that were happening near Seladove, as well as this Ukrainian Hind was operating fire support missions in support of the Ukrainian soldiers near to the area. Also, I like that little crink that this guy's just got snuggled in right on the side of the cockpit window. Beautiful.
Man, that crink has a switch on it.
Man. Moving on. Man, he got the blicky. Dude, if that helicopter goes down, watch out. You got an angry Ukrainian in the fields, and he's got the blicky, man. But moving on from that and into Kurakove, we also got to see a Leopard 2A4 crew operating against the Russians in the 33rd Mechanized Brigade. Now, check this out. Whoa, with that trap remix? Oh, whoa. The only trap out here in these fields is the traps the Ukrainians laid for these Russians, and they fell for it. Oh, that HE round just slammed right into that guy, making his day a little bit worse. I guess you could say that while the round spells HE, he ain't going to be going hee-hee. He's going to be going... But still, we can see the Russians still wandering back into the trees after noticing a Leopard is stalking their position. Here we can see the Ukrainian Leopard getting a delicious snack and using its MPV drone to chase down and devour the remaining Russians on the battlefield. Here
oh boy, this isn't any leopard. This is the leopard. Oh yeah, this is the best leopard the world's ever seen. Right there. Look at it go.
Oh, crap,
Leopard
it's right
284. It's right there. It just showed up. And, come on out, little fella. Don't be shy.
I gotta tell you, it just showed up out of the blue, just like it did, an absolute miracle. People used to say...
Oh, man, and that fire. Look at that fire. Do you see that fire out of that thing? I saw it coming down. I was worried at first, but I saw that fire come out, and I knew they had it in the bag.
And I walked into the room, and I said, wow, that's a beautiful fire, an absolutely beautiful fire. No one makes fires as beautiful as this one. But we can see it firing right on the Russians, like, literally, like, point blank. Whew. Dang. Dude, it's crazy to just see that thing literally, like, wipe out a part of a tree line when it fires. That's just insane.
I'm telling you, when that leopard showed up, those Russians went and cowered in the corner. I'm telling you, had them crying like a wimp, that is, in the corner.
And someone said
that sounds like Shane Gillis.
He does a pretty good impersonation, man. He was the guy I showed you the other day. You know, the one I was talking about, and you're like, dang, how's this guy not canceled? And I was like, well, he's just, like, you know, that guy. It's like, oh, and there's a Russian.
Oh, there he was.
It was.
How about they turn on that light every time they see a Russian?
Bro, they got to light him up.
That's where the term comes from.
Oh, man. But still, that's the end of the clip right there. Wonderful stuff to see. We love to see it. And great to know that the Leopard 2A4s are doing their work. Meanwhile, we finally got to see some of the last clips of fighting in Volodar today. That battle ended a little while ago with the Ukrainians having to fall back out of the town, the Russians claiming a Pyrrhic victory. But we were able to see some of the last clips of the heavy fighting that happened in the city. We're going to be muting that.
Nothing like some 80s techno.
Steven said, if this is a false story, it is a reckless one. Well, why don't you just watch the stream and, like, at the beginning where that story was covered and just listen to what happened? It's We report the news here on this channel. And that's the end of that clip, but still showing a little bit of that heavy fighting. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we were also able to see some older footage from Volodar as well in this clip. They have to include music in every single one of them. We can't just hear the ambience. We have to hear that absolute sick beat. Let me get on Sono AI. And let me come up with a sick beat for all of us to hear right now. Right here, right now. Fresh off the mill. Make a song. Make a song. And we're still in. And we want to create a song. We want to create an instrumental. And we want it to be that funk type beat. That's all I'm going to put in. And we're going to see what we get.
Obviously, it's going to be whack.
Oh, dude, it's going to be terrible.
It's going to be like some department store music.
Dude, I'm not going to lie, man. Sono's gotten worse, man. I got on it. It is so unoriginal sounding now. It doesn't even come up with anything interesting, but... There we go.
Yep. Department store music.
Just watching you.
Hey guys, this is my daily vlog today. Today we're going to launch a tow missile at the Russians. Look at it go. Wow.
Hello everyone, and this is your daily dose of war. Watch this Ukrainian fire this in-law and obliterate these Russians.
Welcome back, defenders.
Oh god! Oh, let's take a look at Romania.
Oh yeah.
Oh no. Moving on out of Volodar. Hey, keeping up with the sick beats, we are now going to be moving on down into Vervobe, where we got to see a Russian column hit by a HIMARS. That video was promptly deleted for no reason at all, but hey, we're just chilling, right? You know what I mean? And also someone brought up that this sounds like corn music, and no, corn music is very different sounding. But moving on from that, we are now going to be moving on and up into Kyiv, because it's time for us to get to the speech. This part sounds like a vlogger, man. And now it's time for us to move on from the first class lounge into the plane. Wow, look at the first class seat. It's just so nice and so much room.
Can you get it to make it like a dramatic beat or something like that, or something, and then play that instead? Because this is Garbo.
Let's see, dramatic type beat. Like, dude, that's literally the descriptor I have in the thing. It just says dramatic type beat. We're gonna see what
it's probably gonna make like a keyboard typing noise or something like that, and make the keyboard dramatic.
Oh no, it probably will, honestly, man. Like, let's see if it will before we get to the speech. Dude, every single one of them sounds like a copy-free track. Like,
I feel like I'm just waiting for that audio tag to come up in a minute going, Audio Jungle.
Dude, please subscribe or something like that. It's like, whoa, it's like, that's freaking loud. Let's go to the other one. These are horrendous.
Audio Jungle.
Fresh beats or something like that. But anyways, moving on from that, it is time for us now, all jokes aside, to get to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day. Oh, did y'all see my thumbnail pop up there at the bottom? That was pretty cool. But anyways, it is time for us to get on into the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 991 of the war. And so without further ado, here is the speech. Peach!
Здоров'я, шановні українці, українки, перш за все слова вдячності всім нашим воїнам, які забезпечують удари наших дронів. Кожен бачить, як це працює, дрони на фронті, також наші далекобійні дрони в глибокому російському тилу. Російські військові об'єкти стають все більш досяжними для наших воїнів. Я дякую Службі безпеки України та хлопцям із сил спеціальних операцій, російські військові склади, аеродроми і їхні підприємства ВПК не сховають. Також життєво важливі зусилля усіх, хто знищує російську техніку на фронті, зокрема тільки спецпризначенці Служби безпеки і тільки російських танків знищили вже більш ніж 1300. Кожен восьмий знищений Україною російський танк на рахунку хлопців з СБУ. Я вдячний і воїнам Головного управління розвідки, всім підрозділам, які виконують завдання і на сході нашої держави, в боях і в тилу ворога. Дякую. За цей тиждень ми маємо також важливі рішення наших партнерів. Те, що дійсно допомагає. Це Франція, є рішення про ракетний пакет. Ми продовжуємо з Францією і надзвичайно вагому програму тренування наших воїнів. Я дякую за це. Ми працюємо з нашими партнерами із Сполучених Штатів Америки над новими оборонними пакетами, які підтримують нашу систему протиповітряної оборони. І це те, що вкрай необхідно перед зимою в умовах постійних російських ударів. Ми потребуємо реального прогресу і щодо далекобійності. Є рішення, яке дозволяє американським підрядникам працювати в Україні для ремонту і обслуговування техніки. Це значно прискорить процес. Вдячний також Канаді за спільну роботу з нами над постачанням додаткових систем ППО на САМС. Є на цьому тижні нове рішення Британії щодо санкцій проти російських суб'єктів, які працюють на війну. Це також дуже важливо. Дякую. Всі юридичні і фізичні особи Росії, які забезпечують діяльність російського ВПК, мають бути відрізані від світу, щоб зменшувати можливості Росії уникати справжньої дипломатії та розпалювати війну далі. Усім в світі потрібно, щоб санкції зменшили, перш за все, самовпевненість Путіна. Це абсолютно реалістично. Зараз готується новий військовий пакет від Литви. Також працюємо разом над залученням коштів для закупівлі зброї і виробництва в Україні. Швеція, є нові рішення і у цивільній підтримці, і у військовій, зокрема для нашої морської безпеки. І, звичайно, наша вдячність кожному партнеру у світі, всім політичним та громадським лідерам, які дбають про те, щоб справжня дипломатія спрацювала. Ми абсолютно чітко розуміємо, без сили дипломатія немає перспективи, але і без чіткого розуміння дипломатичних цілей зброя всю роботу не зробить. Саме тому сила і дипломатія повинні працювати разом. І тільки так, щоб мир став надійним і щоб не було повторення такої війни. І це реально. Я дякую всім, хто нам допомагає. Слава нашим воїнам, слава всім нашим людям, всім громадянам України. Слава Україні!
And
Herom Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. And that is moving us on into the second part of this stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. But before we do, I do have to thank you all so much once again for watching the stream so far. If you are new to the channel, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because we have so much more to go. And we just put in another trap type beat into Sino AI, and it's sounding absolutely copyright free. But nevertheless, we are going to be getting on into the second segment. And Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our donations here, our top donors of the night. Man, that is like distracting as hell.
I know.
I'm not gonna lie. Like, that music in the background is distracting the hell out of me. But anyways, the last top donor of the night that we have here goes to Sir Real User 9. He puts in a $50 donation and brings us up to almost $4.4 thousand raised. We're getting very close to $5,000 actually. And huge shout out to you, Sir Real User 9, for that support, and also a huge shout out to everybody else for supporting the fundraiser for Revived Soldiers of Ukraine, and that is amazing to see once again. While I see people going berserko about the background music that was there just then. But anyways, we're going to now move on to our Morse code decoders of the stream here, because we are fresh out of polls. But tonight we had the entire roster. It was Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, Corolla Fluffiness, and Arabella Garbo, and T. Willikers. We're moving on to that Morse code right here, and it says Russia is getting a warning from America not to escalate is really something. Get that popcorn and LSA.
And well, my voice is hoarse. That's the sound of money. You know, got that down on the nail. Dude, honestly, man, this like completely changes the entire like mood of the stream. It makes it feel like it's supposed to be one of those stupid, relaxed, like Airhead kind of things. Like, I'm not gonna lie.
It feels real cheap, like
Yeah.
like a commercial department store type beat.
Aw, man, it's time for us to get down to the bottom of what's up in Romania. Ew, yuck. This music was playing in the background the whole time. But all jokes aside, we're going to have to stop that, because like I actually cannot stand music playing in the stream anymore. Like, a lot of people used to think that would be a cool idea. I'm not gonna lie, y'all, like, it actually distracts the hell out of me. I knew it was distracting Matthew when I did it, but it's like it would sound pretty kind of cool for a little bit, but not for long, because it would completely throw us off. But still, beyond that, I will have to say that y'all got the Morse code message dead on the nail. And I can congratulate the Morse code decoders for getting that message dead on the nail again for the 991st day, because we are only 9 days away from the 1000th day of war, which is crazy to think is actually coming around, I think, at the beginning of next Tuesday. So that's, well, actually not this upcoming Tuesday, but the next one after that, which is pretty crazy to think that we are getting that close to the 1000th day of war. We are going to be trying to, get some fairly interesting stuff lined up for that 1000th day. We should have something really cool lined up for y'all, hopefully by that point, in the form of a live orchestra playing the Armed Forces medley that's currently in our intro right now. And we'll probably also make a whole bunch of other stuff a little bit more special about that intro. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can, to the Morse code decoders and everyone else. And also, I just saw something. I'm going to address this one really quickly, because this one was one that I found very interesting. Robert Staton, I'm just putting someone on blast there, put in the chat, Andrew and Matt, you guys never disrespected the current president by mocking him on your show. Your mocking of the president-elect is very disappointing to hear. What the hell do you mean, Jack? We've been doing this voice. Corn Pop was a bad dude, and you're a lying two-faced pony soldier. We've been. I don't know where I am. We've been doing this voice forever. What the hell do you mean? Like, we've been mocking everyone.
Nobody's more sensitive than this guy than Rosie O'Donnell.
Oh my lord, that is ridiculous. Like, I hate to say it, like, that is actually a ridiculous statement. We have made fun of literally everyone but one person, and that was the candidate that did not win the election, and that's because we can't do female voices. Like that would be impossible for our vocal range. So literally everyone has been has had their voice done on this channel, but like one person, and that's just because we can't do their voice. Like, no one is free from that. So trying to make the claim that we are just like blasting the president-elect and we've never done a voice to kind of make fun of the current sitting president, that's really crazy. Like, right there, you would have to have literally been blind to like 90% of the show, because that's crazy. Also, on top of that, we aren't mocking anyone. We just joke around. Like, I'm sorry if you're that political of a person that we can't joke about your specific candidate or your political people because you think they're godlike and no one can actually touch them or make fun of them. But literally anyone and everyone could be made fun of. There's some people out there probably making fun of us right now, and they probably have pretty good points. Like, like one day someone's going to parody our show, and someone's going to say, and with that, we're moving on to the next one, like 1 million times during the course of that parody. I'm going to get a laugh out of it because it'll be true. Like, it would maybe a little bit jabbing at us really hard, maybe, but it'll still be funny as hell because it'll be true. You know, like, that's why we don't really get offended about really anything that people do to roast the channel, because there's like a little bit of truth in it. Like, people saying we're like Bert and Ernie, like, I can kind of get that. Cheech and Chong, kind of get that. Beavis and Butthead, I kind of get that too. Like, we still don't allow people to just like roast us in the live chat, but I get it. Like, those are actually pretty good burns. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, at least the best I can, because I just don't know how folks just never know that we are like doing voices of everyone. Like, we don't even just do voices of political people. We do voices of just random people out there sometimes. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses that well. And we're on to the first question of this segment. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right. And also, just for the record, by the way, like, I could honestly care less, like, about, like, either one of them, to be honest with you. Like, I don't have hard feelings toward any of them, to be honest with you. They're all in the same boat in my book, and I'll leave it at that. But anyways, jumping into our first question here about Spain blocking weapon shipments to Israel, and how do you think this will affect the war?
And, let's see. Hang on. Blocking weapon shipments to Israel. I have not heard about that, and I don't think that's going to affect much of anything, because if we're providing them with weapons, Spain is not really going to have a good leg to stand on to stop U.S. ships from transiting the Strait of Gibraltar and heading on into the Eastern Mediterranean to supply the Israelis. So I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can, because I don't think that's going to be going anywhere at all, to be entirely honest. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Knox Date, who says, any news about the American contractors that was supposed to be inside of Ukraine?
And let's see here. Let me see. Do you hear about Spain blocking weapon? Oh, let's see. Hang on. Any news about American contractors? We haven't heard any news of American contractors entering Ukraine yet. They're probably still getting the contracts lined up for them to be able to enter where they're getting paid. So we haven't heard anything about them yet, but I'm sure that's still in the works in the background and probably will be happening soon. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And our next one here goes to, let's see here. And also, I see a lot of people agreeing with my comment I just made a moment ago. Like, seriously, like, this is my thing, folks. Like, vote for whoever the hell you want to vote for. It's a free country. But at the same time, don't ever get to the point where you, like, personally hate any of these candidates. At the end of the day, they're all politicians and they're all in the same profession. So, in my mindset, it's the politicians versus the people. That's the way it's always been from the beginning and founding of every single government. It's just the way it works. The politicians have interest and the civilians have interest. And sometimes they're not eye to eye. So always keep that in mind and don't get too caught up in the trying to really wrap people up in it. And the people that don't get too wrapped up in it, those are the people that can see a lot more clearly, in my opinion. But anyways, jumping into our next question here, this one goes to Mad Machine. He said, do you have any idea how bad things must get in North Korea before the people will revolt against the dictator?
There is, like, as far as North Korea is concerned, there is literally not a point where they will revolt from what we know. The citizenry has just been beat down so badly over time, and they've literally gone through the worst situations imaginable, and they've never been able to rise up in any way to overthrow the government. So I don't think that ever will happen. It will have to be some sort of a military coup where a aspiring general somehow seizes the opportunity to overthrow the Kim family and bring forward their own version of a dictatorship in North Korea. That's really the only way I think it could work, because there is no way for the citizenry to rise up in that country. The military pretty much holds all the power, and the citizenry have practically none. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Andrew Honeycutt, who says, should the next logical step for drones be a logistical role? For example, rapid supply drops with ammo, food, medical supplies, etc.
That would be a good role for them to fill, but we largely believe that in the modern day, that probably would be susceptible to electronic warfare jamming systems near to the front, or it may possibly be intercepted by some form of anti-drone air defense, such as another drone specifically designed to take those drones out. So it may be better for those to still be transported by truck or by some sort of autonomous ground-based drone that would be able to bring the supplies up to that point. I don't think air-based drone would be the good way to do it, but a ground-based drone would probably be a little bit better and assure less attrition rates being afflicted onto the supplies. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one here goes to David Tablet, who said, do you think maybe the threat to put boots on the ground in Ukraine by the incoming administration is an effort to put Ukraine in a position of strength for the upcoming negotiations?
It can certainly be the case, considering that they'll have U.S., official U.S. backing. That's something that people haven't really considered a lot, actually. And we don't really know how this would be going. We have heard, like this has been the general thing that a lot of people want to believe or have been hearing, is that there will be an end to the war in Ukraine and there will be peace, but we really have not known what that means. Like, a lot of people assume that just means peace at all costs and appeasement, and that's kind of what we have assumed a little bit as well, but we don't really know if that means that in particular, or if that means peace at all costs at any cost, but it's going to be a peace we're happy with. We don't really know which one it is at the moment, but that may be the case, that it's posturing to diplomatically get the Ukrainians into a good negotiating position to get favorable terms. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
And our next question here goes to Plexus Gaming, who says, if the U.S. and Russia go to war, should we make it our objective to help all the regions of the former Soviet Union break away and become independent states?
And let's see here. Let's see, Mandy, can you highlight that question? Oh, there we go. Should we make it break away and become... Well, we kind of already have with most of them, especially the Baltic states and Ukraine for the most part. I don't really think the Central Asian countries are really our concern or priority. There's really no way for us to reach them. So I don't really like the idea of that strategy, because it would be very time consuming. And not only that, would start to pose major diplomatic issues for really, in the big picture, insignificant countries that really wouldn't count strategically. So I would say Not necessarily, unless if they're in Europe. If they're in Europe, yes, let's help them get away from the Soviet Union if it's, well, from the Russian Federation if it's possible, if they were a former Soviet republic. But beyond that, the rest of the former Soviet republics are kind of out of our jurisdiction, of a sort, if you want to call it that, are really out of our reach. So for that reason, it doesn't really mean much if they still remain Russian aligned. And on top of that, most of them are economically destitute. Pretty much all of the Stand Series countries have very small or marginal economies, and so it doesn't really matter who they go to, because there really isn't a lot of economic opportunity or activity to be seen there at the moment, and probably well on into the future. And so with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one right here goes to John, who says, did you guys see where they said they were using fiber optic cabled drones now? And is that like a tow system, but for a drone?
Yeah, it's very similar to a tow system for a drone. We have seen that, and we actually did cover that yesterday because one of them was used to hit a Ukrainian M113 within the area of Malia Luknia. So from what we know, yes, these are starting to be used a little bit more. It pretty much completely removes the threat of electronic warfare jamming systems knocking out a drone, because the connection is wired. So there is no way for the drone's connection to be knocked out, because the connection is literally hooked directly into the drone. So with that in mind, this is going to start posing a lot more issues for the Ukrainians to be able to intercept and destroy these drones, and probably will have to bring forward an even newer and more revolutionary anti-drone system to be able to deal with this threat. But we have covered that, and it does seem to be an emerging threat to Ukrainian drone superiority in the conflict so far. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night, interestingly enough, because in our spreadsheet, we only have 3 questions left. And so with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
All right, and this one's going to go to none other than Purple Gerbil, who says, do the current president and the new incoming president consult on foreign matters before the handover? And I can actually tell you that they actually do that. That's part of the transition process in between an outgoing president and an incoming president. They both meet together typically at the White House, where the outgoing president explains where their current foreign policy stances are currently, basically what the status is of them. And they try to tell the new incoming president, here's kind of like what I was thinking I was going to do here, and this is probably what you should do. And then the incoming president will say what they plan on doing, and they try to come to some middle ground, so that way the entire thing doesn't fall apart in foreign policy. That's the way it's supposed to work in theory, and we'll just have to see. But Enforcer, what's
That is exactly how it goes, and that actually can be seen fairly well, actually, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, because there is a call in the presidential library of JFK's where he actually called up Eisenhower, who was the former president, and asked him what he would do in that situation, or his advice on that sort of a topic. It was a very interesting call, actually, to listen to in between Eisenhower and JFK, but that is a fairly good example of a former president that pretty much gave over the reins to the next one, trying to advise them on where they were going and what kind of an action would they take to counter the Reds at the time. Or in the modern day, that might be what happens with Ukraine. We're not entirely sure, but that usually is how it goes. So we probably will see, if it goes as normal, that the incoming president is advised, or at least told by the current president, what their general foreign matters policies were and what the general direction was. And so I hope that addresses that well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, and this one is going to go to XBet, who said in January of 2024, Putin signed a decree that Alaska was part of Russia. And why is this not spoke about very much? And do you think the USA would think different if more knew about it?
It's not really spoken about much because it's really kind of a joke. Like, are the Russians really going to come back and get Alaska from the United States? Certainly not. Like, any chance of that ever happening is pretty much moot. So while they're trying to make some sort of a territorial claim on Alaska, it just never would happen. And that's why people don't really care about it that much, and that's why it wasn't really brought up a lot, because we even considered it on this channel to be such a joke. It was pretty much a non sequitur topic. It wasn't even worth covering as actual news, except for as a small side note. So that's generally why a lot of people don't know about it. But I feel like that would start to change a little bit of American opinion, especially if it became very public knowledge that the Russians want to retake Alaska at some point or get it back. I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't really be that happy with the Russians. Or, to be honest, like, the people who are for Russia right now probably would not change their opinion. People these days in America specifically, and it's not really been like this throughout history. I'll just say this because this is kind of like a standalone modern thing. people in America nowadays, when they see something in politics they don't like, would rather see the country they live in go into absolute chaos and hell, also knowing that they'll be taken with it to the depths of hell, just because they don't like what's going on. Like, those people actually wish for it. So if they heard that Russia claimed Alaska, they would probably say something like, well, hell, they need to take Alaska because American government is bullshit, or something like that, and then, that would be about the end of it. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I also
Hello?
hello. Are
Man,
you?
it wasn't even coming through when I was talking just a minute ago. But anyway, I saw Ms. Disa said, trust me, I read it. They said that's not what it said in the letter. So apparently, according to Ms. Disa, apparently the letter did not say that Alaska was part of Russia, based on what Ms. Disa is telling me. So I have to trust Ms. Disa on this one, because typically she is right about everything. She's like the keeper of the records here. So I think there might have been a miscommunication.
And there may be a miscommunication there, but still, based off of that question, that's what my answer would be. But Ms. Disa appears to have contrary information, and so also keep that in mind, that letter probably stated differently. I remember that we covered that letter on the channel, but I don't remember what exactly it said. But still, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is like
We
the
actually have
last?
some more. We actually have
Oh.
some more in the spreadsheet, by the way.
Great heavens! But with that, we are on to the next one. Actually, great heavens!
And this one is going to go to Hal Rose, who threw in that massive donation tonight. Thank you very much, Hal Rose, for that donation to revive soldiers of Ukraine. He said, someone mentioned that Turkey has sent 4,000 automatic shotguns for drone defense. What say you?
I have heard about it, Hal Rose. Generally, a lot of people have tried to provide automatic shotguns. Interestingly enough, the Turks actually just produce a large amount of shotguns these days. I actually have one of them. It's called a Huglu. Matthew has seen it before, and he's like, whip out the Huglu.
It's a Huglu.
Yeah, it's a Huglu, and it's all right. I also have another one. Let's see here. I got all of these, by the way, before the whole Turkey does Turkey things went to its extreme. Like, this was years and years ago, and I still have them. But let's see. There was one, I think it's a Weatherby SA-459, but it was also made in Turkey as well. They're pretty decent shotguns, actually. They're not that bad, but beyond that, automatic shotguns, I have heard that they have provided some, but generally everyone's trying to get into the whole automatic shotgun deal because it really seems to be the last line of defense against FPV drones. It's really the only thing that has the kind of spread and the kind of stopping power to be able to deal with FPV drones before they get too close. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, at least the best I know. Hal Rosen, a big shout out, by the way, for throwing in that massive support tonight to the fundraiser, because you were a huge part of making this thing possible. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one is going to go to Daniel. And damn Daniel, he says, is the alliance between Russia and North Korea a means to protect each other from China?
Probably not, because both of them are pretty much subservient to the Chinese at this point, economically or quite literally militarily. So I would not think so. I think that military alliance is more so a way of creating a unified bloc that the Chinese will probably integrate later on as a part of their sphere completely. That would be my opinion on that. And also on top of that, historically, there's this huge diplomatic ordeal that went on during the Soviet Union's time, where China and the Soviet Union would vie for North Korea to kind of lean more towards their direction, because China and the Soviet Union actually never really liked each other. They actually were mostly unfriendly to each other. And so with the Soviets, the Chinese, and the North Koreans all technically being communists, but different flavors of communism, the Chinese and the Soviets would back up the North Koreans with foreign aid and support to be able to try and win over their favor, and also show that it was the great Soviet Union or the great communist Chinese that were able to bring North Korea into being a communist utopia. And so historically, that may be a continuation of North Korea trying to pretty much reconnect their link to the Russian Federation as the successor to the Soviet Union, and once again start jockeying for the Chinese and the Russians to battle with foreign aid on who the North Koreans like the most, or who gets the credit for saying that North Korea is their success story. And that is probably what the North Koreans are doing with this, and that's probably what I'm suspecting at the moment, because the historical trend is that would be the case. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And Matthew, is this our last batch of questions here? Because if so, I'll start the countdown. If not, we'll just keep answering them.
So this is, I believe, our last batch here. I only see 2 left in the spreadsheet, and that's all I have. So I think this might be the last 2.
And so with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, so this one goes to Nate, who says, is that video of the North Korean that was caught by the Ukrainians authentic? And to me, I can't see any North Korean military being willing to speak against their leader.
If you saw the video and it was like a couple of days ago, I don't think that one was authentic because the Ukrainians hadn't even confirmed that they engaged them in battle at that point. So I do not believe that that clip is real. I don't think we've heard of any North Koreans that have been filmed yet that have been captured. So I'm not really sure if any of those videos at this point are authentic. We're still trying to get some fact checking and verification on that. So for now, I'm going to have to say it's probably not accurate. It's probably like a staged video, but we are still going to be trying to figure that out. But for now, we're going with it's a staged video. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so who is the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is none other than Mad Machine, who says, expanding on the use of drones to supply one's forces, would use expand into supplying ammunition and medical supplies for the most part for the front line and or the cutoff units?
Cutoff units usually aren't cut off for long. They usually surrender or break out and rejoin the line. So as far as supporting or supplying an encircled unit, they could be used for that, but it would be a very rare instance because strategically and doctrinally, no one wants their forces to be completely surrounded. It's pretty much a lose-lose situation at that point, and something has to change drastically about it for that not to continue. But as far as drones supplying equipments, medical supplies, ammunition, and stuff like that throughout the front lines, I do believe that the armies of the future will most likely completely automate a large part of their logistical forces, so that way they can start to put more of their personnel into combat forces and also greatly reduce the amount of human error that could happen in the logistics forces, and also the lack of sometimes reliability of the logistics forces that is brought about by human error. Machines are infallible for the large part, at least in those kinds of operations. They will carry on their path, on their course. They will find the most efficient route every single time. That's been in testing for a little while now, and we actually saw that way back in the day. It was shown on Top Gear, a system like that was being tested, and I have a feeling that that probably will become a certainty in the future, that a large amount of the logistics forces will become drone operated, even if it just means that they're automating the trucks, like the trucks we have right now, which I believe are like Oshkosh MTVs. Those just get modified where they're driverless and they take in automated input. That probably will just become a standard because it makes things a lot easier to operate on the logistical end. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank every single one of y'all so much once again for watching. It has been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to cover this news and also get to talk to y'all and answer some very interesting questions at this point for all of y'all tonight. If y'all, go ahead.
I didn't say anything.
Oh, I heard, and I was like, what? I was like, huh? But beyond that,
Not me.
Man, maybe that was someone outside or something. But if y'all have enjoyed it, please make sure to subscribe. Make sure to like and comment. We love to see more people joining the channel. We're up to, I think, 304,450 subscribers at this point, which is a very high amount. And we hope that more people continue to join the Lee Spring Army as it grows day by day. I also have to wish y'all a happy Veterans Day. We will be putting out a community post about that tomorrow, and once again, commemorating Veterans Day and celebrating it tomorrow. But nevertheless, I thank you all so much once again for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow. Well, actually, not tomorrow. Well, actually, maybe I will. I don't know. Hang on, Matthew. Let me think.
Tomorrow's my video day.
Yeah, tomorrow's your video day. Matthew will see you all tomorrow on Veterans Day if there is enough news to make a video. If not, we will both see y'all on Tuesday when I make the video or during that stream that night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And a massive shout out once again to the amazing, invincible, and legendary Lee Spring Army, raising another $4,406 for revived soldiers of Ukraine. And with that, good night.
And also, folks, huge shout out as well from Enforcer Matt for helping us to reach that $4,400 figure right there. That is impressive to see and well above the $3,000 goal. And once again, another successful Sunday night fundraiser stream. And where else on YouTube do you see this happening? Literally every single weekend. Nowhere else. And it's all thanks to the LSA for making it possible. Huge shout out once again. And also, I will see you tomorrow midday for the short war video if there's enough news to cover. And I will be seeing you on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern for the stream as well. So once again, Slava Ukraine, Heroem Slava, get some rest, and happy Veterans Day, and we'll see you on Tuesday, and good night.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.